And we're live.
Good evening. Welcome to our Municipal Council agenda for Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 for the town of East Gwillimbury. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask if there's any declarations of interest. Seeing none, I will ask if I will proceed with our land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaty, First Nations, and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental steward of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. I'm at community announcements now. I am sure many are encouraged by the recent provincial federal announcements regarding a further easing of public health restrictions. Whew, finally. While this is good news, I encourage everyone to be patient as we continue on this positive path forward. I think we can all agree that it has certainly been cold the past few days. However, the silver lining is that this deep freeze has kept our outdoor skating rinks at the Mount Albert Community Center and Ridgeview Park up and running and very busy. Many are enjoying the rinks, love to see all the positive comments on social media, and I want to thank our terrific Parks and Recreation staff for their hard work on these rinks. And coming up on Family Day, Monday, February 21st, our recreation team has planned some wonderful family fun day activities. Plan to attend at the EG Sports Complex between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. for some great fun and a free skate. More information is available on our website. And my last announcement, as many of you may recall from our last council meeting, today will be Marco's last council meeting with us here at East Gwillimbury. Marco Ramuno, General Manager of Development Services, will be leaving EG on March the 4th, 2022 to pursue new opportunities. On behalf of Council, I want to thank Marco for his leadership and contributions to the town over the past 3 years. Marco will certainly be missed by all of us at East Gwillimbury, and we wish Marco all the best in his new position. Are there any updates from members of council? Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind everyone of the coldest night of the year walk for the Blue Door Shelter. That's coming up on February the 26th. It's a virtual event. That doesn't mean that we as the group of East Gwillimbury walkers can't get together if we decide to do so. We'll make that decision a little bit closer to the time. I was on the website yesterday. I think we're currently sitting just a shade over $1,000. I think $1,050. And Madam Mayor, as you know, through some council members and some employees, we have had some very generous donations so far, and hopefully we can push this one a little bit further. So those donations can be made if you go to CNOY / East Gwillimbury. That's coldest night of the year, East Gwillimbury, and you'll come to our page. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foster. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to add into your comments about appreciation to Marco Ramuno. I got a chance to work with him closely and appreciate all his fine efforts over the year. Since I think he was with us since 2019 and helped us with the 404 employment to lands, did a review of the town's register of heritage properties, and helped us with the bylaws of the official town plan. So wish him well. And as far as the community announcement goes, the Mount Albert Lions are having their maple syrup breakfast on Saturday, March 5th. So I'm sure they'll be working through all the guidelines and whatnot, but that's a nice sign that things are starting to slowly get back to normal when we're having pancakes with the Lions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Persicini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week, we finally got to present the Holland Landing Community Group's plaque to Artisan Baths in Holland Landing for the best business in our Light Up the Landing Holiday Lights competition. It was a while before we could get it to them, just with everything being locked down and that, but it was nice. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for coming out with Councillor Foster and I to present them with that plaque. If you haven't been into Artisan Baths, it's a great local business, and we thank them for all their support of our Light Up the Landing initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Persicini, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to also wish Marco all the best. We're going to miss him. I know he completed a review of the town register of the heritage properties in February 2021, and also initiated the review of the update of the town official plan draft updated the official presented to the council on February the 15th, 2022 for the purpose of ongoing public engagement. He's done so much for us. I'm really proud of him. I hope that when he gets out of his system, he comes back to us. Marco, tutto bene. I hope you wish you all the best. My friend, you did a great job for us. I speak on behalf of me. Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Are there any other? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add to your comments and that of my colleagues. When I worked in the private sector, the owner of the company hired a vice president of sales that us managers referred to as Super Dave the Temp. And he lasted 32 days. And I would suggest that while Marco's tenure has lasted a little longer than that, it was over 1,000 days, I'd say, if we were to calculate it. I think he had a lasting impression on us, and he's moved a number of big projects over the finish line for us. And while his tenure was short, it certainly was impactful. And I want to thank him for his efforts on behalf of our council and that of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, prior to going into the business of tonight's meeting, I just wanted to advise Council that we have just received a notification from one of the deputants who's unable to join tonight's meeting, and they have rescinded their deputation. This is Cory, President from Principal Planner, Land Economist Project Manager from Malone Given Parsons in relation to item F3. The individual will not be joining tonight's call to provide that presentation, that deputation.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move along in our agenda to item E, and that would be a COVID-19 update. And I'm wondering if there's a staff member who will be giving us an update. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to all the folks this evening, including council, of course. Positive news, as you said, on the COVID front from the province, and the most largest announcement, in our opinion, is the March 1st is the date that they're planning to open limits on indoor facilities. And that will directly impact community facilities and town halls and city halls and civic centers. And we're really hopeful that the hard work we've put in over the last 2 years with our COVID team and Build Back Better operations have put us in an excellent position to start moving forward in March. And we will have a full update for council coming. Planned at this point for one of the two meetings. We're leaning towards March 8th to provide a full update to council. And we're very excited from a staff perspective for the community and our stakeholders that we're going to be getting back to a normal, much more normalized business and a new way forward. So at that, if there's any specific questions, I know Mr. Velchich is planning a real update for us in March. And if there's any questions at this time, or if Mr. Velchich wants to add anything, I'll open the floor.
Mr. Velchich, would you like to add anything to our report so far?
Madam Mayor, just a couple of minor points. Well, one maybe not so minor, but just that the memo you have before you this evening references the the change is expected for February 21st. And so clearly with the announcement just yesterday, that's been moved up to February 17th. And then as the CAO indicated, the potential for further relaxed measures and more expanded access March 1st. So I'm going to recommend that the memo that you have before you be received as amended. And what we'll have, I've talked to the clerk earlier today. She's indicated that we can have an updated amended memo posted for tomorrow, just so the official record of your meeting today reflects the information that was announced by the province yesterday. And as the CAO mentioned, we're approaching, believe it or not, we're approaching the 2-year mark in mid-March of being in this state. And so it's only fitting that as we come out of this and see measures relaxed, that we provide a more comprehensive report for you and a bit of a review of the last 2 years in a presentation. And it's really important to note that as much as I think we've done a great job managing the COVID response, emergency and business response and so on, also with the recent census data informing us that we've been reported as the fastest growing municipality in Canada over the last 4 years. So we've had our mitts full, and we'll be looking forward to providing that comprehensive summary and update a few weeks from now.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Mr. Velchik? Councillor Roy D. Clemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Not necessarily a question of Mr. Velchich, but just a comment. It was my understanding that over the weekend, York Region Public Health had I think what they called it was a soft launch of boosters for ages 12 to 17. And there's been a recent announcement that boosters are going to be available for our youth to have their 3rd shot, some of whom have been waiting quite a few months. So I just wanted to make note of that I had no idea that this was happening, and there was no communication to us as community leaders that this was happening, but it did happen. There were a number of reports on social media that people were walking in with no appointment, getting a booster for their teen, which is great to hear. But it would be helpful to have that information if it's not a soft launch and they don't want it shared, it would be nice to be able to respond to those inquiries from residents regardless. And I know that that's a regional thing and not a municipal thing, but just wanted to make note of that. And I guess for our records, to note that boosters are now going to be available for our youth. I think it's as of, if they want to make appointments, it's as of this Friday, if I'm not mistaken. But again, that's just social media that's informing me more so than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Mr. Velchik, if we could check to see if there is any details that we could put up on our website for people moving forward, particularly for our youth.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor, we will do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Roy D. Clemente. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. I have a motion, be it resolved that administrative memorandum dated February 15th, 2022, entitled COVID-19 Update 2022-03 be received. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, with respect to the revisions that were outlined this afternoon, if it could be received as amended, staff will ensure to include all the revised additions to the memo.
Thank you. As amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. We are at item F of deputations, and we do have a deputant this evening. M. Osmond, Coordinator, Events and Partnerships, Southlake Regional Health Center Foundation, making a deputation regarding the 2022 Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake, and we're always busy with that one for sure in East Gwillimbury. So if you are there, could you join us at this time?
Well, surprise, Mayor Haxon, is Councillor Broome here, not Melanie Osmond.
That's a surprise. Good, but certainly good to see you.
It's great. You guys are my second favorite municipality in Canada, you can only guess which the first one might be. And I just want to take a moment, since we're all smiling and laughing, to wish you all a great Valentine's Day yesterday, and to thank Councillor Roy Clemente for wearing Southlake colors today. And, you know, those of you who don't know how amazing this team is, and small and mighty, you have the resident expert. You know, that resident expert on your team here knows a little bit about runs and walks. In fact, he has one named after him. So I'm expecting big things from EG this year. So I'll get on with my deputation if you don't mind. If someone could kindly put my presentation on the screen.
Through Madam Mayor, just bear with us for a moment. We're having a bit of a technical issue in the back end.
No worries. Does anyone have any more jokes they'd like to share?
How's one of my favorite girls doing? How's Kelly doing?
You know what? We miss you here in Newmarket.
I know. Well, I'm always, my heart is always there. I may be here, but I'm always there, and been a lot of years, a lot of good years.
Yes.
But I'm really enjoying East Gwillimbury. I gotta admit, I guess it's all about the staff. The staff really makes it happen for me. So very grateful.
You guys like to have fun. I like that.
Yes, we work very smart with each other.
Madam Mayor, through you, it appears that we have never actually received the Southlake slides. Unfortunately, we are not in possession of the slides at this time. We do have a written confirmation of the content that was supposed to be shared for tonight's purposes.
I do. You sent me an invite, and these slides are included in the invite, if that helps any. Do you want me to forward it to you, or do you want me to wing it?
You can forward that to me, and I will share that from this end. Thank you so much.
All right. No, my pleasure. I have procedures here, but I don't. Lee, are you Liesel? Is that email going to work, or is there someone else's email you'd like me to use?
You can send it to Liesel. That's totally fine. Liesel is our committee coordinator. She will be able to assist.
All right. So towards the bottom of what I'm about to send, hopefully this will get us to where we need to be. All right, it's in the cyberspace, on its way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. I guess I could congratulate Marco while we're here.
Yes, you could.
Here we go. It's always sad when you lose new great people, but I'm sure he's got big plans and big shoes to fill.
His own.
You see what I mean? You guys are so much fun.
Madam Mayor, if we can't get the cyber world to cooperate, I'm going to suggest that we possibly move this to our next meeting in March. I don't know if it's, I don't think they're planning the run quite yet, but I know they want to get this behind them. So I would suggest that might be an option we consider, is to move it to our March 8th meeting if we don't get it straightened out in somewhat of a timely manner.
Not to worry, I don't mind seeing y'all twice.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it appears that we do have the slides. It's just a matter of pulling them up onto the screen. So just if it's okay with members of council, we can bring them up shortly.
Please.
Sure.
Please.
Leave it to a Newmarket councillor to disrupt your flow, huh?
It's quite all right, but it's never happened to us before since we've been going virtual. So don't take it personal. However,
No worries. Good thing we all know each other.
She likes the camera, so it's okay.
Not really, but thanks, Joe. Oh,
Here it is.
yay.
Yay,
Right. Oh, thank you, Town Councilors and Mayor Haxon, for allowing me to come and speak with you today. In case you haven't figured it out, my name is Kelly Broome. I'm a volunteer with the Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake. We would like to invite you to join us for the 2022 Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake, a Southlake Foundation. We fundraise with one goal in mind, supporting our leading edge hospital and the communities it serves, making sure that we have the tools and equipment they need to better work. As our community grows and changes, our hospital and foundation fundraising goals grow too. Always looking forward to ensure that we are serving our current and future patients best. Next slide, please. For years, Southlake has shown a passion for care for our communities. From our beginnings as a 6-bed home care, Southlake has evolved to become a 500-bed regional health center that provides leading-edge hospital services. Southlake is building healthy communities through outstanding care, innovative partnerships, and amazing people. Southlake is our hospital. It's where our friends, families, neighbors, and community members go to receive leading edge care close to home. Whether it's the birth of a new baby, complex cardiac care, cancer treatment, or emergency visit, Southlake is proud to serve our communities. By registering for this event, you'll be supporting the most urgent needs for patient care at Southlake Regional Health Center. From basic needs like beds to cutting edge equipment like an MRI or enhanced spaces, you can help our expert frontline staff provide our communities with the best possible care right here close to home. Next slide, please. This year, we're providing participants the opportunity to join in person on Sunday, April 24th, or virtually on April all month long. The Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake is a hybrid chip-timed 5-kilometer road race raising funds from Southlake. We've designed the Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake to be flexible so you can participate in your time with an activity of your choice. Join us in person and return to the route you love. A 5 run or walk along Davis Drive, Newmarket, or if you join virtually, select your own distance goal and begin working towards it as soon as you register. Plus, join us for virtual classes throughout the month of April. Interested in both? Any in-person participant who raises at least $150 gains access to the first week of virtual experiences. Registration is ready open at runforsouthlake.ca. Registration is $50 per adult and $25 youth under 18. This includes your t-shirt, medal, and race kit bag. Next slide, please. In 2021, the Mayor's Challenge raised the most they have in the past 3 years, raising $54,336. Your team did a terrific job. I believe you came in second. Last year, Team Aurora won and is currently holding the Mayor's Challenge trophy and what Mayor Maracus is calling the three-peat, as well as bragging rights. I'm looking forward to seeing an even tighter race this year. We're hoping to evaluate and overhaul support for your hospital by asking each and every registrant to raise fundraising minimum of $100. Aurora was $29,000, East Gwillimbury $13,000, Newmarket $5,470, Georgina $3,100, King City $2,000, and Bradford $1,621. I'm really looking forward to seeing somebody take the cup from Aurora. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time. We look forward to participating alongside you during this year's Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake by crossing the finish line together on Davis Drive or participating in a virtual class or two. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Questions of Kelly? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
I think I've asked this question every year for the past 11 years, and that is I'm asking the committee whether they will be evaluating the results based on a per capita fundraising. So as East Gwillimbury, while we are the largest and fastest growing community in in York Region, we're the fastest growing, we still have a small population. And so we consistently punch above our weight class. And yet we are not, we're not in the running for the Mayor's Cup simply because on a per capita basis, while we might be doing better, we just don't have the population to support it the way that some of the other municipalities do. So I'm just, as I ask every time, is the committee going to consider a per capita fundraising as part of their assessment for the Mayor's Cup?
Absolutely. I mean, we do track everything when we unpack the event at the end. We want to see where our participants came from, who participated and why, and where they live. So we can certainly, I can bring that back to the committee, and maybe we can have a per capita award as well, so that we can really try to award all the municipalities and all the councillors and residents for participating. But I do recall last year, East Gwillimbury had a heck of a lot of participants. I was very impressed. And I think you're absolutely right. I will do my best to bring that to the committee, and we'll come up with some kind of a challenge per capita.
Thank you, Councillor Broome.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. Be it resolved that the deputation made by Kelly Broome, Coordinator for Events Partnerships, Southlake Regional Health Centre Foundation, regarding the 2022 Nature's Emporium Run for Southlake be received. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you so much, Kelly. Wonderful to see you tonight. And as per our history in the past with the run, I'm sure you can go back to the committee and let them know that East Gwillimbury is going to be a part of it, and we're certainly up for the challenge. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Our second deputant tonight is T. Coolman, President of Pflag Canada, York Region, making a deputation regarding G1 Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee report, Inclusivity Crosswalk in the town of East Gwillimbury.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Before I get started, that cup, that's a really great idea. We might steal that for our own fundraising efforts and put all the mayors up to task there. So Southlake, we're going to steal your ideas there. And thank you, Mayor Haxton and council members and members of the public. My name is Tristan Coolman, and I'm the president of Pflag York Region. I'm here on behalf of Pflag and many of our community partners, including Care Community Connections. Pflag York Region is an LGBTQ2 support, education, and resource network offering support meetings to LGBTQ2 people, their family, and friends. We provide training and other educational seminars to public and private organizations to increase their capacity to support LGBTQ2 employees and patrons alike. We would like to thank Council for allowing us to speak tonight on the importance of installing an inclusivity crosswalk in the town of East Gwillimbury in alignment with the recommendation from the town's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. The Pride Flag is an incredible symbol of equity and inclusivity. Its various designs and models are an example of that work in this area is constantly evolving, and that work should always represent the diverse and lived experiences within its community. You've noticed, and you may have noticed over the past few years, that there's been a change in the inclusion of different colors and symbols in the Pride Flag, and that's an example of our community's commitment to elevate voices and experiences from within our own community. It's a symbol of safety used by educators and institutions like libraries and businesses who adhere pride stickers to windows and raise flags on their storefronts to identify a space that is welcoming and safe for all. These moments are incredibly important in securing a more positive mental health outcomes for LGBTQ2 individuals and their families and friends. The work, however, is far from over. In 2019, the federal government undertook a first of its kind study on LGBTQ2 health in Canada, and the report highlighted a number of opportunities which highlight predominantly negative mental health and physical health outcomes for LGBTQ2 folks in comparison with the general population. As an example, with the general population, suicide and suicide attempts tend to occur at about a rate of 4.3%. But for individuals who identify as gay and lesbian, it's between 10 and 14%. For bisexual folks, that's 21%. And for individuals who are transgender, the rate is as high as 43%. We know our culture is progressing, but everyone has a part to play in maintaining and growing that momentum. Family and friends still have difficulty navigating resources and supports to have a more positive impact on their LGBTQ2 loved ones. And there's a small minority in every community whose voices of hate have far-reaching impacts. Hate-motivated vandalism in York Region communities and assaults continue to occur. Hate crimes are on the rise here, including in York Region. And even the events of the last few weeks nationwide are an example that there are individuals who are filled with hate in every community who are willing and continue to act despite our cultural progress. The key to combating these events and these negative mental health outcomes they produce is possible by making and producing more affirming resources and programs and installations of cultural significance like the Inclusivity Crosswalk to spark conversations and to connect individuals and families with more positive mental health outcomes. It is still difficult for these families, but all of these items are still part of that solution. What your LGBTQ residents need from their elected officials is more open, brazen, and unapologetic support for their lived experiences. And an installation of an inclusivity crosswalk paired with affirming and inclusive programming is one of the many ways to support them and contribute to a more positive mental health outcomes in our communities. As communities here at EG continue and are expected to lead growth here in York Region, what better way to further invite and welcome families into your communities than to show not only through your program delivery, but in your cultural installations that the town is one that is open, that is diverse, and that is affirming for all people. And leadership here is committed to promoting positive mental health outcomes for the residents. Thank you very much, and I welcome your questions and comments.
Questions, comments? Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not seeing any at this time. I have a resolution, be it resolved that the deputation and written submission made by T. Coolman, President of Pflag Canada, York Region regarding item G1, Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee Report, Inclusivity, Crosswalk in the town of East Gwillimbury be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone, Councillor Roy DeClemente, all those in favor? And that's carried. And Mr. Coolman, your item is the next one up on our agenda. So if you wanted to stay and listen, then you're certainly welcome to do so.
I certainly will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have staff that are going to speak on a portion of this report?
I believe we have the chair of the committee here, Lena Singh. Not sure if Mita's online. She's our staff liaison. There she is.
One of you two ladies would like to say a few words regarding this advisory committee report?
Yes, please. I would like to say a few words. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council and staff. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. And I know I speak not only for DEAC, but for our residents when I acknowledge the sterling work that's being done by staff, of course, with the approval of Mayor and Council to make EG the best place to live, work and play. Of course, that we see that message, we hear that message is being received loud and clear as EG now is the fastest growing municipality in Canada. And it's something that we should all be very, very proud of. I know as a resident of EG, it makes me very, very proud. Of course, with that growth comes an increase in diversity, and we must increase our inclusion efforts to keep pace. So that will keep our committee very busy. An important part of inclusion is a feeling that you matter, that you belong. And when we have visual displays of support, such as the flag raisings that we have been doing to support different communities and an inclusion crosswalk, it tells the members of the community that your town sees you, your town values you, you matter, and you belong. And this message that we want to send out to the community is even more powerful when that symbol of support is directed to the youth members in our community. And we spoke earlier on several different occasions tonight about the importance of the youth in our community. And we have also talked about the way the pandemic has been affecting the mental health of everyone, and the youth in particular. Tristan Coolman alluded to the fact that suicide rates among those in the 2S LGBTQ community is higher than the general population. And York Regional Police, when they installed a crosswalk, an inclusivity crosswalk at the safety village, they said, with the high rates of homelessness, suicide, and attempted suicide in the 2S LGBTQ plus youth community, it is more important than ever that young people know they will be welcome for who they are. That struck a chord with the members of our committee. We are all parents. We have all put youth at the front of everything that we do. And to hear that youth is driven to suicide because they do not feel accepted, it's horrifying. And it's something that really made us stand up and take a note of this. It is our responsibility as adults. It's our responsibility as members of our community to do everything we can to protect and save lives, especially youth lives. And if by seeing an inclusion crosswalk in their town, if it allows even one youth to feel supported, to feel lifted, and to move away from depression, from the thought of suicide, if only one youth is affected, then we would have made a difference. So on behalf of that committee, we respectfully ask that you seriously consider our requests and approve it so that we can make a difference for the youth in our community. The report goes into details about we have an utmost trust in the ability of staff to make this happen and to work out the details. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena. Questions of Lena? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and for you too, Lena Singh. I really appreciate your strong words and your passion that you've shown here tonight, and the leadership that you've helped out on our community committees. So thank you for that. I'm supportive of this effort. I'm trying to wrap my head around the community crosswalk, which I think is a great idea. But I remember seeing the one in Aurora, and there were rubber from the tires of the vehicles going across it. And I just felt that was in some way disrespectful. And I just want to make sure that we're not disrespecting a flag or a symbol by putting it in a crosswalk. Help me, reassure me that won't be anything that happens on a crosswalk where there is traffic and such, that it won't be misinterpreted.
Thank you, Councillor Crone. That's absolutely a valid concern, and we thought about that as well. And in thinking about that, we thought that it would make sense to put the crosswalk, and we were hoping multiple crosswalks, in a location that's not going to be subject to as heavy traffic as a regional road. So we don't want to put it across Leslie where there's traffic up and down. Instead, if we were to go on a road that, for example, a road leading into the Civic Center or a road leading into the libraries, there is traffic there, but the traffic there is nowhere as heavy as it would be on a mass road, a regional road, or a road that's heavily traveled. And I believe, the way our staff, I repeat what somebody else said earlier. I do believe the town of East Gwillimbury has the best staff in the world. And I do believe that they are going, and I don't mean this, and I don't say it lightly, nothing they have ever shown us has led me to believe they are not. They are creative, they are conscientious, they're very, very enthusiastic about being inclusive, and they are very, very good at coming up with resourceful ways to make this happen. And I am certain that using our suggestion of the locations that would, would lower traffic. I'm sure they have better ideas than we do to put together a crosswalk or crosswalks they're going to stand the test of time and not be a drain on our resources.
Councillor
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My suggestion was going to be that while we know other municipalities have installed such crosswalks, I wanted to do ours better. And I'm assuming that we're going to be referring this to staff and ask them to come back to us with some recommendations. I wanted to see if there was a way of, I know this sounds silly, but maybe glow in the dark, maybe glitter, I don't know, but something even better than what is already being painted in other municipalities. I want to see us do it better, and maybe we should do one at a time. My recommendation was to start at the Civic Center and then, depending on budget and so on, then refer the other two to the 2023 budget. But bigger and better is how I look at it. But I'd like to see what staff have to say as far as tread-resistant paint and longevity and that sort of thing as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I know staff are taking notes here as we're speaking. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. I'm aware that there's a clear coat that can be put on the paint as well, but we have some excellent staff who deal with our roads on a regular basis. So I would expect that if we set this off to them for a report to come back before they actually put it on, then we could have a last minute look at how great it's going to be. I have a resolution. Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to thank Lena and the committee for bringing this forward, and the conversations I've had with staff to see if this was even feasible. I think that this is a great idea, and I thank everyone for their support around it. And the motion that we have before us, I think, was taken from the report, and I think it just needs to be updated, Madam Clerk, because I'm hearing that we would like to direct staff to come back to us with the strategy and timeline. That's what I'm hearing from everyone else, and I'm very happy to move that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
May I suggest strategy, timeline, and budget, please? Thank you.
We'll just wait for Madam Clerk to read that back to us, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I will share my screen. Just bear with me for a moment. And I believe Councillor Roy DiClemente, you had suggested to move that item.
That's fine, but I think Councillor Crothers, given that she's the liaison to the committee, would prefer to make that motion, and I'd be happy to second it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Be it resolved that Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee Report DIAC 2022-01 dated February 15th, 2022, entitled Inclusivity Crosswalk in the Town of East Gwillimbury be received, and that the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee respectfully requests that Council consider developing a strategy and timeline to create an inclusivity rainbow crosswalk in each area of the town in time for Pride Month in 2022, and that Council refer the DIAC report back to staff to report back with a strategy, timelines, and budget implications. Are there questions? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, and a seconder, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Roy DiClemente had seconded the item.
Thank you. Then we'll reverse those, and Councillor Roy DiClemente has moved it and Councillor Crothers has seconded it. Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Very exciting. We'll wait to see when staff comes back.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at presentations, item H, and I have R. Palmer, Principal, Planning Partnership and Development Services staff, making a presentation to council regarding the draft updated official plan and open houses.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm going to have CAO privilege and kick this very important item off.
Thank you
And,
very much.
Since it's one of the most important things we do every 10 years, which is a decade, and we did do this in 2010 with our first ever consolidated official plan, it really set the trend. And I too want to acknowledge, as I kick off, Marco Romuno, a friend and colleague of mine. We go back 30 years. And it's interesting that the day after Marco finalized his resignation, we were, through Census Canada, noted as the fastest growing municipality in Canada. So Marco leaves us at an exciting time. He's got some unfinished business in Aurora. One other thing that we've done well, and I don't want to get into the accolades for Marco's 3 short years here, we've built terrific teams at East Gwillimbury. We have depth that we've never had before. And part of my start for this evening is to publicly make an announcement about where we're heading in the interim with respect to our development services department. We have a fairly recently minted and experienced CBO, Andres Saunier, and we have a newly recruited deputy CBO with great experience, Chris Burns, in our building branch. And we've just done a complete review of that area, and we're in good hands as we deal with record level volumes in that area. With respect to the planning side and the development services overall management, we're fortunate that we have Lawrence Cuck. Lawrence joined us with Marco from Aurora. He brings over 20 years of senior experience and has served as an interim general manager for a number of municipalities as well. And we're appointing on an interim basis Lawrence to oversee the department. And as well, we have Adam Robb, and I always get him confused with Rob Adams, who's the CAO of Stouffville, and so does many others when they send out emails. But Adam Robb brings, again, great depth and experience. He has worked for York Region and Aurora and has done a stellar job for us in a short time period as well. Adam was a real key part of our zoning amendment appeal that we had, the bylaw appeal we had with Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. And Adam's been a very visible and upfront proponent of our official plan. So tonight we welcome Ron Palmer, who brings great depth and experience to this exciting project as well, and that external perspective that we need to continue to be the greenest community in Canada and the best planned community in Canada. And we also bring Adam, Rob, and Lawrence as our new leaders in the planning side and development services area, and as well Marco to assist with the presentation tonight. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over, I believe, to Marco, who's going to kick off tonight's presentation, or is it to Adam?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Yeah, so there's 3 of us that will be presenting before we turn the council's attention to the report. We have a number of slides. Adam will start, Adam Robb, and then Ron Palmer, our consultant working on the OP project, and I'll finish it off. I just did want to add to Tom's comments that, I mean, this is a milestone where we've actually prepared a draft OP for presentation to council and release to the public for ongoing engagement. We started this process about 18 months ago. I think Adam will go through some of the timelines. And I just wanted to stress, though, that it is a draft document. We are looking for feedback and input from members of council, community at large, all stakeholders, and we will be starting the next round of public engagement. We've already got our open house scheduled for open house for March 3rd. That's a virtual meeting. And then we're going to work towards scheduling additional open houses, and hopefully they'll be in person over the next number of months. So again, I just want to stress this is draft, and we're looking for input from the community at large. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Adam to start the presentation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Marco, and good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Yeah. So we want to start out by overviewing some of the project milestones and engagement that has occurred to date for our official plan review. And the details of these engagement events are also further summarized in the attached report presented here tonight. In August 2020, the project was kicked off and the dedicated website was launched. To date, we have over 70 registered interested parties that received notice of all project updates. In the fall of 2020, we held mayor and councillor interviews and also held public visioning workshops to hear community feedback on the desired outcomes for the official plan review. In March 2021, we delivered a Growth Management Council presentation and launched the Chat with a Planner engagement, which was a unique way to connect and listen to comments from the public, this being especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. In April of 2021, there was a special meeting of council on the discussion papers, and in June, we also held a community workshop, which had over 111 attendees to discuss the discussion papers themselves, their themes, and then in turn inform the policy development for our updated official plan. In September of 2021, we sent out Whitebelt property owner mailouts and then presented the final discussion papers and land needs assessment to council. And most recently has been the development of the draft updated official plan itself and our senior management team review. Next slide, please. So in terms of the schedule ahead, today, of course, is the presentation of the draft updated official plan. Then over the course of February and March, we'll be circulating and presenting the draft to our various advisory committees and external agencies for their review. On March 3rd, as Marco mentioned, a virtual public open house has been scheduled to receive public feedback on the draft. And then on April 12th, there will also be a council workshop. And again, as Marco mentioned, the draft updated official plan as presented tonight is exactly that, a first draft. And then refinements can and will be made as an iterative process based on the multiple rounds of engagement that we have ahead of us. In May, we are anticipating to hold a statutory public meeting, and then additional refinements can also be made at that point prior to a finalized version being brought back for council's adoption then in June. Next slide, please. And with that, I will now turn it over to Ron to go over the draft official plan structure itself.
Thank you very much, Adam. And it's always great to be here in front of council at East Gwillimbury, particularly today when we're kind of unveiling our big draft official plan, and it is pretty big. To start, it was a bit of a surprise earlier this evening to hear that Marco was leaving. I won't take it personally that every time I seem to be working with Marco, he leaves before I get finished. But I'm sure I'll see him again in Aurora. To begin my presentation, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the official plan, what's in it, what's new, and what importantly is relatively similar to your current official plan. Certainly, the first three chapters are new. The first three chapters, Chapter 1 and Chapter 3, particularly come from the engagement process that Adam went through at the beginning of this presentation. We listened, we heard what people were telling us, and we tried to articulate that in organized planning policy dealing with very specific topics. Chapter 2 is new as well because it is a specific response to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe and the ongoing work being done by the Region of York through their Municipal Comprehensive Review and their soon to be approved new official plan. Chapter 4, which is one of the largest sections of this plan, and it deals with the land use policies. There are sections of this chapter that are very similar to the existing official plan, and those are policy frameworks that relate to your existing secondary plans for most of your community areas. Those policies have not been fundamentally adjusted. Policies for the natural heritage system and policies for the rural agricultural area have been adjusted, and I'll talk a little bit about how those have been adjusted when I get to that slide. Sustainable infrastructure, again, is similar to the existing official plan. We know that there is ongoing work through a master transportation plan and a master water and wastewater plan as well. The framework remains similar, waiting to accept any new suggestions or requirements from those master plan projects. Chapter 6, implementation and interpretation. This really talks about empowering the municipality to use the planning tools that are available through the Planning Act. And then the interpretation part is about how to read the plan, how to use the plan, and how to work with the definitional aspects of the plan. Along with the plan, there are a number of schedules and appendices. Those are supportive of the document. The schedules are a statutory part of the plan and are fully integrated in the text. The appendices are non-statutory, but are still very important to provide additional guidance to how the plan is to be interpreted. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through a little bit of background on what's in each of these chapters, starting, of course, with Chapter 1. As I said, this is new information. Working with the stakeholders, including all of members of council. As I went through talking to people, presenting to people, and listening to people's commentary, this section, this chapter, is really about establishing the framework through which policy will follow. So we have a purpose, we have a vision statement, and we have 8 key guiding principles that set the stage for East Gwillimbury to the year 2051. Next slide. This chapter, growth management, is really important. As we have discussed, this is really a response to how East Gwillimbury will grow to the year 2051. You have a population allocation of up to 127,600 people, 43,800 jobs, which are minimum growth estimates that will be incorporated into the Region of York official plan. This chapter also reinforces the urban structure that is evolving in East Gwillimbury, identifying your built-up areas, your designated greenfield areas, and your future urban lands. This is an important part of the official plan, and it's important to note that in terms of the allocations for population, we are expecting that the central growth area, which includes Sharon, Queensville, Holland Landing, and Green Lane, we're expecting that population to be 113,600 people. In Mount Albert, we're expecting approximately 8,000 people. And in the rural agricultural area, about 6,000 people. Those are estimates, and those are to the year 2051. The planning policies and how those population figures are accommodated is really about how the municipality can grow, can have the infrastructure necessary, and manage growth in a way that is appropriate for the East Gwillimbury context. The final part of this chapter does talk about phasing, and it talks about how development will proceed. It includes density requirements for the greenfield areas and intensification targets for existing East Gwillimbury. Next slide. This chapter begins to articulate a number of key elements of the plan. The words come partly from the stakeholder consultation, but partly also from broader provincial and regional policy documents. The phrases used are common planning phrases that we've attempted to put in the context of overarching policy frameworks. We start with a successful community, and it's about how East Gwillimbury will remain successful as growth occurs over the next 30 years. It's important that East Gwillimbury be a complete community. And this is a section that talks about housing, walkability, accessibility, connectivity, public service facilities, all working towards the idea of a 15-minute neighborhood. That means residents in a neighborhood are within at least at most a 15-minute walk to community services, retail and service commercial uses, public open space, and so on. That section is also very important because we talk about affordable housing in that section, and we do provide quite a robust strategy for attempting to achieve affordable housing in a reasonable and appropriate way in East Gwillimbury. The next one is about viability and financially responsible East Gwillimbury. Here we're talking about economic development, growing the employment base, and making sure that development occurs in an efficient and cost-effective way. Next slide. A beautiful and high-quality community. This is something that everybody wants for East Gwillimbury, building upon the successes of the past. We talk about CPTED principles, that's crime prevention through environmental design, designing with nature, public art, heritage conservation, and this makes reference to an urban design manual that will be included as an appendix to this plan as we move through the policy review process. We do talk about the idea of East Gwillimbury as a community of communities, what that means and how it might be achieved in the future, keeping in mind that East Gwillimbury is a cohesive municipal entity. There has been conversations about how to maintain the integrity of the character of the various communities that make up East Gwillimbury. A healthy community is another important concept, and this is about supporting public health considerations in urban design, promoting urban agricultural opportunities, active transportation, which is related to walkability, and the promotion of cycling as a modal opportunity in support of growth in East Gwillimbury. The last one on the list is sustainable and resilient, and this is something that East Gwillimbury has been very good at historically with your Thinking Green development standards, and this builds on that initiative and talks about how the municipality will deal with climate change and, of course, the protection of your amazing natural heritage system. Resiliency talks about emergency planning and how you're going to deal with human-made or natural events as they may occur over time. It's about planning to be ready, even though it's very difficult to know what might happen next. Next slide, please. Chapter 4 is when we get into the details of land use designations. This is a very significant section of the official plan, and as I mentioned, some of it is very similar to your existing policy framework, and I would say that would apply for strategic growth areas, community areas, and employment areas. There has been a lot of work done historically in the planning of these areas, and it was determined through the review that the policy framework was up to date and was useful on a go-forward basis. One thing that I wanted to point out was in the employment areas, some of you may recall in Queensville, in the Queensville secondary plan, there was a parcel of land set aside for a post-secondary educational facility. I've made some adjustments to that policy to broaden the opportunity for that site, maintaining the public education element of the permissions, but also adding other institutional uses like a healthcare facility or other major public uses that could find their home on that site. The natural heritage system is a very significant part of this plan and quite a large section. The reason for that is, and what I've been trying to do here, is that much of your natural heritage system is covered by your current official plan, the Region of York official plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Protection Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. That's 5 separate policy documents that all deal with fundamentally the same thing. So I've been trying to harmonize the designation and utilize the appropriate policy language that protects the natural heritage system, keeping in mind that all of those other policy documents are still in place and are still relevant. It's a complicated piece of work, but certainly I've tried to streamline it with the fundamental objective of making sure that the environmental features within the town of East Gwillimbury are appropriately protected. On a similar vein, the rural agricultural area is also extremely complex. Again, your own official plan, the Region of York official plan, the Greenbelt Plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Protection Plan, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan all come into play. So here I'm trying to appropriately plan for your rural agricultural community in a way that pays respect to those important policy documents, but also provides some clarity on what is allowed to happen in this area and what is not allowed to happen in this area in terms of the use of the land and the ongoing rural agricultural economic activity that happens. The end of this chapter includes land use specific policies, and these are policies that are not necessarily land-based, but are specific land uses that find themselves in multiple land use designations. So the idea here is we don't have to duplicate the same policy framework over and over again. And then the final part of this chapter deals with special provisions and exceptions, which have grown to be a part of this official plan over time. There are quite a number of special provisions and exceptions that we will be reviewing for ongoing relevancy. Next slide. Sustainable infrastructure, as I mentioned, this is very similar to your existing official plan, and it does talk about a whole host of elements related to infrastructure, including the transportation system, and that means active transportation as well as historic road planning, as well as the municipal service infrastructure, which is water, wastewater, and stormwater management. This section also deals with utilities and telecommunications facilities. Again, fairly similar, updated, and of course, recognition of the Highway 400-404 connecting link is included in this chapter. Next slide. Implementation and interpretation, as I mentioned, this is a really important part of the plan because it talks about including all of the opportunities provided by the Planning Act that the town can utilize in implementing this plan. Really importantly, it does talk about the role of the official plan and the zoning bylaw and site plan approval as major tools that will manage future development within the communities. Interpretation talks about the interconnected nature of the policies of the plan, how the plan is required to be read as a whole, and all relevant policies applied, and that this is not a plan that is in isolation of all of those provincial and regional plans that come to play here in East Gwillimbury. It's a very complicated relationship with provincial and regional planning here, and we're trying to give East Gwillimbury a voice in the future planning of the community, as you are expected to grow to a fairly significant degree. Next slide. This is the amalgamated natural heritage system map. It includes a host of, it includes the environmental protection designation and a host of overlays that are partly from provincial policy. The environmental protection designation itself is an amalgamation of your former environmental protection designation, the designations from the regional official plan, and the other designations from the Greenbelt Plan, the Oak Ridges Moraine Plan, and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. In addition to the environmental protection designation, there is an environmental overlay, and that is the lighter color adjacent to the dark green. And that overlay is 100 meters from the environmental protection designation, and that is a trigger that requires that any development in proximity or within the overlay requires that a natural heritage study be carried out to ensure that the resource and the functions of that natural heritage resource are protected. The whole idea of this strategy is to create a designation and a process that can be evaluated on a site-specific basis, that can be refined on the basis of detailed work through a natural heritage evaluation, but that fundamentally it identifies the natural heritage features and functions that have been articulated in all of those relevant planning documents that apply in East Gwillimbury. Next slide. The urban structure of the central area, the main central area, this is a bit of a new take on this map, but what it is intended to do is comply with the wording of the growth plan, and it talks about your rural agricultural area elements. It talks about the settlement area boundary, the built boundary, the future urban area, as well as the specific structural elements that are within the communities as they're being built out over time. Those are the strategic growth areas and the designated greenfield areas. Of course, the environmental designation is continued through here and identified, and we talk about the new designated greenfield areas as future urban development opportunities. Next slide. I think I'm going to let Marco talk about this slide while I have a drink of water.
Thank you, Ron. So this next slide is a schedule that identifies the central growth area. So this is the area where we're expected to see the majority of the growth long term, up to 113,000 people. This includes the existing communities, the new growth areas, and the future urban areas. So this is contained within the central growth area. And as mentioned in the earlier slides, I think that we've raised this before to council that even long term, once this entire area is built out, 83% of the municipality will be protected green space, townwide. So following the urban expansion areas in the approval of this plan down the road, the next step would be the preparation of a secondary plan to deal with the detailed land use planning, road network, community uses, schools, parks, institutional uses for these new community areas. And then the hatched area, we've identified the 6 new community design plans that will be subject to a separate process to manage the phasing and the more detailed planning within these individual new community areas. And that'll assist again as a phasing mechanism and to manage the pace of growth as we continue to move forward. Next slide, please. So these are these are the existing community or secondary plans in our current plan. And as Ron mentioned, these, the 4 of them, the community of Queensville, Sharon, Holland Landing, the Green Lane secondary plan. These were secondary plans that were approved a number of years ago. They're under development currently. The policy context in these secondary plans are up to date, as Ron mentioned. So we aren't proposing much in the way of change here. Ron did mention the one change in Queensville, the post-secondary education designation. North side of Queensville is being proposed to a major public use to provide a little more flexibility. We've also will be outlining the major transit station areas, which we never had identified, and those are the mixed-use, high-density areas around the Young Green Lane transit corridor and the GO station corridor at Green Lane and Second Con. Next slide, please. Again, this is the rural and agricultural area mapping. The designations here, aren't changing. We still identify those key areas, the Holland Marsh area and the prime ag and rural areas. And Schedule 2 refers to, again, the urban structure map that we showed earlier on, the central growth area. Next slide, please. I believe this is one of the last slides we've identified, and this is again just one of the schedules showing the active transportation, parks, and community facilities. And I believe this, and there are more schedules in the OP, but we just wanted to highlight some of the key schedules for discussion before we turn our attention to the report. I believe that's the last slide, Madam Clerk. And then thank you, Madam Mayor. We can certainly open the floor up to questions, or we can move to the report, whatever's your pleasure. Thank you.
I think we'll deal with the questions first and then go to the report. This is an education opportunity for all of members of council to get their questions answered. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll put this to both staff and Mr. Palmer. Looking at the 2051 target of 127,600, and then you compare it to what I think was our 2031 target, which was, what was it, about 86,000? You can correct me if I've got the number wrong or not. But when I look at how close we are, or not very close to the 2031 target, I can't help but go back to my corporate days. When we were setting goals and objectives, you want them to be, smart, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So, when I look at the 2031 target, we'd have to more than double in the next 9 years to hit that, and I'm not sure I see that happening. And so given the pressures we're having with our servicing solution, are these numbers really attainable and realistic? And so that's my first question. The second question is, does it really matter if we hit them? Are there other repercussions for not hitting our targets other than credibility of our ability to set targets? So 2 questions there. Whoever wants to take a stab, please have at it.
Mr. Webster, you'll take a stab at it?
Gladly, Madam Mayor. I'm not the town planner, nor am I an expert like Mr. Palmer. But I do bring one thing with my time at the town, and it's some corporate memory. And when our official plan was put forward in 2010, there was no Highway 404 constructed. There was no York-Durham sewage system constructed. And the second concession was not improved with the wonderful bridge and trail system. And a lot of people said it couldn't happen. And those three things were achieved. And at the same time, Madam Mayor, I recall in your first term as mayor, we were at a lot of public meetings regarding a regional project of great significance called the Upper York Sewage System. And the CAO of the Township of King, Dan Kostopoulos, was actually the project manager for the region at the time. And Dan would come to those meetings and assure folks that this facility was going to be up and commissioned by 2018. And that never happened. And essentially, as remarkable as our growth has been since 2016, the Upper York has put us in the most unique position of any municipality in Ontario, as we've been paralyzed in planning our growth beyond the York-Durham sewage system. So right now, we know we can move to 50,000 with certainty. And without the Upper York, which has been sitting on the provincial minister's desk for approval for 8 years, we are in a conundrum right now as far as targets. I do agree. And I love smart targets as well, Councillor. You like to plan effectively. The good news we have, and I can share it this evening, is we announced at council session, and this may even be new to Mr. Palmer, the province has put in place an expert panel, independent panel on the Upper York, and they've under the Region of York Sewage Act. That panel is moving with great diligence and has outreached for a lot of consultation, and we're very hopeful there will be a solution. The demand for folks to live in East Gwillimbury, and as the mayor said, to have a front door and a back door and a yard and the ability to raise families is insatiable in York Region. And we're hopeful that that solution will make these targets become much more realistic in the near future. So without the plan and without the approvals aligning with it, we'll be in difficulty to hit those targets, but we're hopeful that the approvals will move along in a timely fashion. And I'll pass it on to any other member of staff or Mr. Palmer that might want to add to that excellent question.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Palmer, did you want to answer, or staff?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Tom's answer was excellent, and I did not know about the panel, so that's fantastic news. The goal in planning in the Greater Golden Horseshoe is to link population and employment growth with the provision of infrastructure. So Tom is exactly right. Without the allocation of growth, it would be very difficult to make the case for the Upper York sewage treatment system and vice versa. It's a circular conversation. But part of your question, I think I can answer. There is no planning jail if you don't achieve the targets. So they will be what they will be, and decisions will need to be made about infrastructure to facilitate the growth. And that's really important. The other thing that's really important is official plans are written to be amended. And if there are decisions about Upper York that are not favorable to it being built, certainly I believe that this municipality would need to reconsider its growth ambitions. So I don't think you have to worry about not achieving these objectives. I think you do have a staff and a development community that's very motivated to see East Gwillimbury evolve in the way that's articulated in this plan. But things may change, and you'll need to respond to those if that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Ramuno, any comments or questions?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I think Tom and Ron hit the nail on the head. I think we need to do the planning work. We've got the allocation of from the province and the region, and so we need to. It's a long-term plan, and I think obviously we do need the servicing in place, and those are some of our phasing criteria that are built into the plan. Without the servicing, development won't proceed. But long-term, once we do have a solution, I think the our goals. Our forecasts are achievable, and I think it's a balanced approach to growth management for the town long term.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, did you have any comments to add as well?
Yeah, I mean, just not to repeat too much that my colleagues have already mentioned, but these forecasts do come down to us from the growth plan as well, which was updated in 2020. These are forecasts for the region as a whole to be over 2 million people. And then from the region to allocate that population target to us as well to implement. So don't want to echo too much, all great statements already made, but one more thing.
Thank you. Comments, questions from members of council? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This was a lot to digest over the last number of days. It's a huge document. I just have 150 questions, so bear with me. I'll pick the top few, but this is something that there's a lot to question in this. There's a lot to ask. I hear Ron's comment about OPs are written to be amended, and that both gives me comfort as well as scares me a little bit, because I always think that it's always we can't go back, we can only go forward when we're amending. So our OP in some way is a promise of what can happen. And if we backtrack from that, we end up at a tribunal. Please correct me if that's not the way it is, but that's sort of the understanding that I've come to. So when I see in the plan that we're talking about 6 stories within our village core, that's the floor, not the ceiling. We start negotiating with developers from 6 stories. It'd be very hard for us to say, no, we only want 4. So I'm speaking like it's a statement, but it's actually a question. Is that correct? That if we approved 6 stories, we'd be very hard pressed to turn someone down and say, no, you can only do 4.
Madam Mayor. No, through you, Madam Mayor. No, it's a good question, Councillor Crothers. And of course, that is one change that we staff have recommended, the increase in height specifically from the current 4 stories within the village core designation of the 3 secondary plans, Holland Landing, Queensville, and Sharon. We're proposing 6. Again, we know that there's going to be some discussion at the council level and even from community, but we wanted to raise that. Again, it is just our suggestion, and the reason for that is we currently have 4 stories in our OP. Our zoning bylaw has a height of 5. We just felt that 6 is a modest increase. And we still think that subject to certain design guidelines and architectural control, those type of built forms can still be compatible with the existing neighborhood. Again, it would still be subject to a zoning review and site plan review. Again, that is just a proposal, a recommendation that we're making. Glad to hear from council if there's a concern. We'll take those comments back. And again, it's just a recommendation. It's not carved in stone. But again, if it is approved at 6, council, you're correct. An applicant can come in if it's codified in our official plan. We still have a review of the zoning and site plan to ensure that it's still a compatible development from an architectural and built form standpoint, traffic, etc. But under the OP, 6 would be the maximum that would be permitted. Again, that is just a suggestion that we've made to the village core area designation when it comes to height.
Okay, so I'm still trying to understand this, that if we said 4, we could negotiate up from there, make an amendment so someone could put in 6. But if we say 6 and we decide, no, that's a little too big for this particular area, and we tell a developer, no, you can only do 4, but our OP says 6, we end up in a lot of trouble with them, right? We end up before the LAT. And that's what I'm trying to get at is we need to be tight with our OP because as Ron says, it's written to be amended, but it can only be amended in one direction. We can't go backwards, right? So that's my comment, is that we have to be very, very tight with this, knowing that we can loosen up where we need to. My second of just 3 questions is around green corridors. The text of the document speaks to green corridors. I look at this that, according to the census, we added 10,000 over the last 5 years. We're talking about adding 100,000 more over the next 29 years. And I worry about the impact on wildlife and what we can do to help mitigate that impact. And, I love our natural heritage is being preserved, but we need to make sure that those are connected. So the language in the document talks about connecting, but I'm not seeing it on the mapping. So I'm just wondering if we can get a little more understanding of how the intent of the text will actually get into the mapping. And I'm not talking about trails. I'm talking about large scale connections between the natural heritage systems.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll talk about some of the thought that went into this draft of the official plan related to the corridors, because there were in your current official plan some broad symbolic corridors on the mapping. My fear with showing them on a map is that they aren't natural heritage features in accordance with the definition of a natural heritage feature. And I don't really have a problem with being aspirational in favor of the environment, but I am concerned about showing things on the map that there may be limited ability to actually achieve. Now, the corollary of that is also true. If they're not on the map, they probably won't be achieved. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a balance about how aspirational do you want to be with the environment versus what you actually could achieve on the ground. I think there's probably a better opportunity to achieve that kind of connectivity in the area where there's going to be a new secondary plan, because you can start to talk about how you might achieve. In the rural area, there's not really any mechanism for you to achieve it unless you want to go out and buy it. So I'm not opposed to being aspirational in favor of the environment, if that's something that you would like me to reconsider. I'm happy to do.
I think that this is a huge opportunity for us. Writing a plan like this, there's not very many municipalities who get to do it. So I think being aspirational is good. We will be looking at this again in 10 years. So allowing space for wildlife to get used to the next 10 years worth of development before we move into the 10 years after that and the 10 years after that, I think is a really good thing. So I like the idea of looking at the wildlife that exists. Where is it going to go? We don't want it on the roads where people are hitting deer with their car. We don't want coyotes in backyards eating people's cats and dogs. So we have to look at when we are displacing the huge amount of wildlife we have here, where do we think they're going to go? And I just want some thought put towards that as we move forward. My last question is around phasing. So, I mean, I get that we were looking out to 2050 and what will it look like then, but there's a lot of time between now and then. So where do we start? I see on the plan, I know we have 70% of our white belt, there's still 30% that's for future. But of everything that's in pink right now, there's a lot of little stranded pockets in there. And when we talk about building complete communities, we talk about walkability, less use of cars, those little stranded communities don't work with that. So in the fullness of time, yes, we might need to build out to every little pocket we have. But I would like to think in the next 10 years, we'd be looking at completing the stranded communities we already have. We would look at connecting up what's already there before we even start to look at some of these little tiny pockets all over the place that we're seeing on the map. So I'm wondering, how is phasing going to be addressed in this plan so that when the public looks at this, when developers come and say, I want to develop this little pocket over there, we can say, no, council wants us to start here. These are our first priorities. This land over here is one of our bottom priorities. Like, how does that work in the official plan? Where do we see that kind of language? Where do we have a discussion about what we want to see first?
Through you, Madam Mayor, quite early on in the document, there is a phasing section, and fundamentally, phasing of new development has to be linked to the availability of infrastructure. East Gwillimbury does have a significant amount of land that is already planned within the existing secondary plans. And that should be a priority insofar as it doesn't require much in terms of additional approvals. The next big leap is into what's called the white belt now, but the 70% of the white belt. And that requires additional planning work to be done, including proving that it can be serviced. So in my mind, there's kind of, at least in the central area, an idea that it's phased based on existing planning approvals, existing serviceability, and that needs to be done first. Then move on.
So we have the opportunity as a council, if someone comes to us to develop one of these little stranded pockets, to say that's not in keeping with our plan because it's not connected up to anything else. We are able to say that.
Well, I don't know if all the stranded pockets are within an existing secondary plan or if they're just part of the 70% white belt. If they're already in a secondary plan, they would have some level of priority because they already have approval. So maybe Marco could help me out with that one.
Certainly, yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, certainly. I think Councillor Carruthers, you know, we have the existing communities that already have secondary plan approvals, and we're seeing some development applications being approved and development occurring. With respect to the new community areas, the 70% of land that are being brought into the urban settlement area, as Ron mentioned, once this official plan gets approved, the region approves their plan, council approves this official plan update, it goes to the region for approval. It has to conform to their plan as well. Then the phasing, we have phasing policies in this current plan, and it speaks to, as Ron mentioned, you know, the key criteria is the servicing has to be available before any development can happen. And there are a number of other criteria as well with respect to conforming to sort of density requirements, complete community requirements. But before we get to that point, the next step is preparation of a secondary plan for these new community areas. That's going to take a bit of time. So doing that detailed planning, and then that I referred to the one schedule that showed the secondary plan and further broken down to the 6 community design plans. That's a separate sort of planning exercise as well that council will be involved in, and that will establish, you know, additional phasing policies and actually establish sort of the sequencing of development of each block. So council will have control. There's a number of different approvals that council will be involved in, and obviously there'll be additional public consultation when we do start that community or that new secondary plan and the various community design plans.
Okay.
And there will be phasing policies built into those documents as well.
So in those 6 community plans will all be developed at the same time. We're not phasing those. They're numbered 1 to 6, but those numbers are not relevant to a timeline.
That's right. And again, the timeline will be, you know, again, subject to, you know, servicing, and we'll have to work that out as we continue to move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to save my other 147 questions for later. Thank you.
For tonight. Mr. Palmer, did you have a comment?
I think 147 is pretty light. It's less than one per page.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I some of the questions I had have already been touched on, and I have to agree with Councillor Crothers. I had this cloud hanging over my head all weekend that I had to get through this so I could gain a bit of an understanding to make it better. But I will say that, I'm very interested in the building of complete communities and successful communities. There were some very good analogies there and ways to understand that. A couple of things that come up to me, there's a spot in there where we talk about keeping a supply of land for intensification and development in more residential units. Are you referring to white belt lands as our kind of a supply of those lands? I'm just wondering where they would come from. That's my thought process.
To you, Madam Mayor, the issue of intensification in East Gwillimbury is an interesting one because much more mature municipalities have many opportunities for intensification, but you're relatively new. And those communities have not necessarily been designed to be easily intensified. So my expectation is over time, as the community gets older, as the central districts grow, it's the central areas within your planned communities that are going to accommodate what we would call intensification. Green Lane is an excellent example of that. And particularly, there's two major transit station areas that are identified in Green Lane, and those will be the focal points for your contribution to growth through intensification. So it's really, there's always going to be opportunity for intensification. Part of it's going to be in the identified centers in your community areas that haven't fully built out yet. Part of it's going to be in those major transit station areas. So you're going to have supply.
Go ahead.
You're going to have some supply of land for sure.
And Madam Mayor, if I might just take it a little bit further, I'm glad, Mr. Palmer, that going through the document here, I was glad to see that you were obviously listening in the conversation that Councillor Crothers and myself had with you about the community of communities and keeping those communities recognizable. However, I will say what's in here is a great start. I would love to see something more. Having said that, I'm not sure what that more is. And I look forward to kind of going through the process on that one. I'm sure with our public consultation, more stuff will come up. One of the other things, and I kind of wanted to take it a little bit further, that Councillor Crothers mentioned, and again, this is not a question as much as maybe just a comment, but we talk about traditional main streets and looking after our cultural heritage, and yet we talk about 6 floors in height. Those two things just kind of don't fit together. And again, I'm not sure where we go with that one and how we fix it, but that's going to be one that I'm sure is going to roll around in my head for a while. And I'm just not too sure. I don't expect you to say much more. Mr. Ramuno answered the question to Councillor Crothers very well, but I just wanted to mention that, that one's there. But one of the other things that really jumped out at me through this, and it seems very simple, but we talk about low density and we talk about single detached dwellings and townhouses and semis, and we talk about our medium and high density. And one of the issues I've had through this term of council, and we've brought it up multiple times, is parking. And I got a sneaking suspicion that we should almost be, it could almost have a section on its own, how we're going to expect a build out and keep parking doable. I drive a full-size pickup and I know a lot of people drive smaller stuff these days, but when you're driving through developments and there's cars parked everywhere, and basically you've got to stop to let somebody come through, because there isn't room for 2 vehicles. That to me is an issue. Again, I'm not sure how we attack that in an official plan, but I think it might be something worth looking at.
Any
Just to you, Madam Mayor, just on that point, and we have, I think we have addressed that because we have heard from council, or I've heard from council over the past couple of years. And I think we'll have to do, we've mentioned that we'll do a review of our parking standards as we prepare our new community plans and design plans moving forward. So these new communities will have to work on a new parking standard and options to deal with parking in these new communities.
I would hope that transit would make a big difference with it as well. If we can get those buses down those streets, people won't have 2 cars and one sitting on the road. If it's all about getting the transit to a point where the schedules meet the needs, and it's a tough one, but I think when we start to intensify, that's going to be a big project for us to make sure that public transit is available 24/7.
And if I might, Madam Mayor, I fully agree with that, that has to be on the forefront going forward. I just shudder to think that it could be another number of years before we get to that point that it satisfies us all. So I think we need to do something in the interim or somehow to try and help that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to our presenters and our staff tonight. One thing I did notice, it's a small thing and I'm hoping we can amend it. I know this is just a draft and I can't stress enough that when we're talking to the public, this is a draft for discussion purposes. This is not something that council has adopted or is approved. It is our first kick at the can, as it were. And we would like feedback on that. And so I want that to be really clear, because there's often a perception in the community that this is a rubber stamp process, and this is not at all the case here. One thing that I did notice on some of the mapping, it's a bit inconsistent, but I think in the fullness of time, the Doan Road interchange off the 404 needs to be reflected on every single one of our maps. If we leave it off one, then there's a chink in the armor, as far as I'm concerned, that it might not get built or completed. It is built. It's I call it roughed in, but to make sure that actually happens as we start to expand. It's not enough to implement the bypass, but to have that extra exchange that will connect into the center of town, I think, is important. I did want to return to the proposal that staff and Mr. Palmer are making with respect to the 6 stories. Mr. Palmer was on every occasion that he came to us said your 2010 plan was a good one. And so I believe our 2010 plan said that we would go to 4 stories in those village cores. And so I'm looking for a bit more information about the justification to go to that next level. I guess along the same lines as Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Foster have raised, if it was a good plan, why do we need to change it? And if official plans are written to be amended, why wouldn't we simply stick with our original designation of 4 stories and allow for individual applicants within the right context and in the right location to make an application to be considered for a greater level of height in their building? Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank
Through
you.
Madam Mayor, I'll take a shot at this, because the number of stories is kind of, I don't want to say arbitrary, but it is a statement in the official plan. A developer will look at that and say, well, I can either amend it or build it or walk away. And I think there are parts of the plan, and I'm going to focus on your 2 major transit station areas, where you will have a density requirement that won't be achieved in a 4-story built form. So that's a separate conversation that you have to have with the height limits. In historic downtowns, and and you have a couple of nice little main streets that are quite lovely. Redevelopment or reinvigoration is a difficult balance between conserving heritage and promoting new development, which are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Oddly, I am sitting at home on this meeting tonight, and I live in a 5-story building, which is built within a 3-story heritage structure. So the first 3 floors are the heritage piece. I sit up on the top floor, which was 2 new floors built on top. And I think that that is a very sensitive and sensible approach to conserving heritage while still having some development potential. So whatever the decision is on height, yes, it will always be part of the conversation about new development, and the developer will need to make a decision about whether or not they can live with the height limit or not. If they can't, then they decide to do an amendment or not. 6 stories does provide a little bit of wiggle room in terms of fiscal feasibility, in terms of if there is a heritage structure to be conserved, then maybe an extra story or 2 helps to pay for the appropriate conservation of that building. Eventually, East Gwillimbury's land values will become such that it will drive the need to build structured parking. My expectation is that doesn't happen in a 4-story built form, but maybe a taller built form, and it may be taller than 6. At the end of the day, I think I'd like to look at the height limits and talk about, and potentially we could say it's 4 stories. And if you want to exceed it, here's the tests that you have to pass. Or we could say it's 6 stories, but you can't get the full 6 unless you pass the tests. So I'd like to think about how this could be resolved to the satisfaction of council, keeping in mind that there will always be the opportunity for a developer to request a change. At the end of the day, let's work on getting it right in terms of what this council would like to see. And we can go from there. But there needs to be some tests included about the issue with height is the interface with the neighbors. And what is it? And maybe there's a different height if it doesn't interface with an adjacent single detached dwelling. Or maybe it's lower where it does. There's some things we can think about here, and we should probably take the opportunity as we work through this process to explore those options.
Thank you. I would welcome that discussion. I think, you know, we've had a lot of really great conversation in the past year or so about preserving our heritage downtowns, understanding that even though we may wish to do so, there are already zoning permissions and planning policies in place on those properties that even, for example, if we were to put a heritage district in place, that a 6-story building could still conceivably be built. And it's a question of where and how it relates to its neighbors and what it looks like, I guess, is what it comes down to. And I would welcome that discussion, and I'd welcome hearing more about what some of those tests might be that would permit someone to exceed that. I prefer to have options rather than to draw lines in the sand. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Mr. Palmer, when we're talking about height, does it mean that when we determine what is the appropriate height, that it is consistent across the municipality, regardless of neighboring buildings, etc.?
I would say no. We want to be a little more nuanced than that because you have different contexts within East Gwillimbury.
I see the height restriction very different in on our heritage downtown areas, because it really doesn't fit in. Even if they try to do the very best architecture that they possibly can, it still sticks out in a heritage district. However, if we had 4 corners that were going to be built as part of this urban expansion, and there were no other buildings nearby, I could see that there would be more favor for putting a little more height in places like that, particularly when we're talking about multi-res and affordable housing for some of our residents and new people coming in. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, that is a possibility. And I don't know if you've had a chance to review the Affordable Housing Task Force report, but it does get into some of that, and allowing as of right heights in specific locations to help facilitate housing. And again, housing in a downtown is a really good thing. It supports the businesses, it gets people out of their cars. So we have to think about height in a context appropriate way. And it could be different in Mount Albert than it is in Green Lane, than it is in Holland. So I think it's really something we need to think about and be nuanced about our approach. Gone are the days, and you know, the City of Toronto, I don't know if anyone knows this, but is mostly zoned for 6-story buildings. And there was a very specific reason for that. And that was because the developers could write a check for additional height. And that's exactly what has been going on for 35 years in the City of Toronto. That ends on September 18th, 2022.
Oh my, stay tuned.
Yeah, they changed the Section 37 of the Planning Act through Bill 108 and 197. So the let's make a deal for height or density game is over.
Mr. Palmer, I have a concern about the 17% urban expansion lands. And we want to keep, well, we will be keeping our municipality 83% green. So if we don't go to height, I'm hoping we're not drifting into other areas, that we should be planning up front that there will be corners or community areas where in fact we would go that extra 2 stories to make sure that we've got complete communities. It's fine to have bungalows and 2-story houses in subdivisions, but we have people too that are looking for rental accommodation, and that's home to them.
I fully agree with that approach, and you know, the new areas for development will have a minimum density target attached to it, and you can achieve that target if you build everything the same height, let's say 3 stories, or you can have 1-story buildings and 10-story buildings, depending on how you distribute them within the community. In my mind, the best way to do it is to have a full array of building forms. And that also provides opportunities for smaller units, for apartment units, for other types of units, so that you don't get caught in being totally unaffordable and only providing one type of housing.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. I do have a resolution to receive Mr. Palmer's presentation. If there are no other questions, I will move along to that. I'm not seeing any other questions. Could I have a mover, please, for Mr. Palmer? Thank you. Councillor Persichini, Councillor Foster. Be it resolved that the presentation made by R. Palmer, Principal, Planning Partnership and Development Services Staff, dated February 15th, 2022, regarding the draft updated official plan and open houses be received. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Always nice to have you with us.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it very much. Thank you. I am down to Development Services Planning Branch Report 2022-01 draft updated official plan and notice of public open house. We have Mr. Ramuno. Will you be speaking on this?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the accompanying report to our presentation, and the purpose of the report, again, is really to present the draft OP document that we've been discussing to Council and to begin our next round of public engagement. We'll have the OP out for public consultation. We've also looking to schedule their first virtual open house on March 3rd. Our staff and corporate communication department is ready to send out those notices on social media, ads in the paper, etc. And then moving forward, we'll look at scheduling additional open houses and public meetings as we continue to move forward throughout the spring and into the early summer. And we'll continue to report back to Council on the results of the feedback that we've seen, and we'll make the appropriate changes to the document and bring that back for Council's final consideration. So, Madam Mayor, again, the purpose of the report is really to present the draft OP and to begin the next round of public consultation and review of the OP.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Questions? Councillor Morton, did you have a question?
No, Madam Mayor, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Ramuno. Given that the COVID guidelines are loosening up a bit, do you think we can do some in-person meetings and try and get away from the virtual? I think it might be nice to see some people face to face.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's what we're hoping, and we're hoping our next open house can be in person, and we'll have our consultants there, plenty of staff to answer any questions that any of our residents may have about the process and the document. That's the plan.
Thank you very much. Other questions? I'm not seeing any. Councillor Crone, would you move this motion? Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Persichini. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Number 2 is Planning Branch Memo Part Lot Control Exemption Bylaw Holland Green Phase 1 Great Gulf Homes.
Thank you. To you, Madam Mayor. To you, Madam Mayor, this is simply another part lot control exemption bylaw to permit the sale of 4 semi-detached units. There's the accompanying bylaw on the agenda as well. These are 4 semi-detached units currently under construction in the Holland Green Phase 1 on Terrain Court in the builder's Great Gulf Homes.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Ramuno? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item number 3, Planning Branch Provincial Announcement, New Catholic Elementary School in Queensville. That was a great announcement last week. Mr. Ramuno, will you be speaking to this?
Certainly, Madam Mayor. I think most of the council probably saw the announcement. It is good news. We just put a memo on for council's information and for the public's information about the recent announcement. The province is committing over $11 million to construct a new Catholic elementary school in Queensville. It'll be located part of the Phase 5 subdivision that was approved a number of years ago. And it's a school site that was identified in that plan of subdivision, just immediately north of the town's future health and active living plaza. So it'll be a great addition to that community, and the school will, as identified here in the memo and announcement, will accommodate over 400 students and have childcare spaces as well.
Wonderful.
So good news.
Wonderful. Any questions? Could I have a mover? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Foster.
Mr. Ramuno, am I right in remembering that there are 2 school sites there relatively close to each other?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that you're correct, Councillor Foster. I think the other site is a public site, a public school rather, further to the southwest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Foster, that was intentionally planned in the very early stages of Queensville, that knowing our community center would be in the center and available within walking distance of both schools. Any other questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. Development Services Branch Report 2022-04 Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application Green Lane North Realty and Green Lane Northeast GP Limited. Mr. Ramuno, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before we council turns its attention to the report, if I can ask the clerk to put the slide presentation on. I just had a number of slides that I wanted to quickly run through. I mean, this report is dealing with, is recommending the approval of the zoning bylaw to implement the business park employment designation to allow for the Woodbine Phase 1, the large advanced distribution center, west side of Woodbine. So this is the location map. Council will remember that we had the statutory public meeting on this proposed zoning bylaw amendment just last month, and this report is seeking council's approval and passing of the zoning bylaw to implement the employment zone. So again, this area highlights the two properties owned by the applicant. Next slide. And so the area in yellow is the area subject to the zoning bylaw amendment, and that is the area that will be home to the new 1 million plus square foot distribution facility. The entire area is approximately 100 acres. The lands are currently they're vacant, but the earthworks have been underway since September, when council approved the servicing and earthworks agreement. Next slide, please. So again, I think council has seen these proposed elevations and site plan at the public meeting. Again, the applicant's proposing to construct a state-of-the-art distribution center on the site, over 1 million square feet, and it will generate approximately 1,000 jobs in this one facility. And there is also an office component, and that's sort of the rendering to the on the bottom of the drawing, the glass structure. And this would be the town's largest employer. Next slide, please. Just going back to that previous slide, sorry, I forgot to mention that council's strictly dealing with the zoning of the lands. The actual site plan application was the formal site plan application, and all the background studies were received just a couple of weeks ago. They are out for circulation to our various departments and agencies, particularly the Region of York, dealing with the traffic work, like Simcoe Conservation Authority. Once we've completed the review of that site plan application, staff will prepare a future report to council, consider approval of the site plan application and all the technical details of that application, specifically traffic, parking, the design of the building, and the landscaping requirements, etc. The next slide, I've included the proposed landscaping and screening slide that was submitted. So this is the proposal. proposed landscaping slide from the applicant. Staff have met with a number of residents already who appeared at the public meeting last month. We've had a meeting with them. They've raised a number of concerns that they want additional information on, really relating to sort of the construction activity, the traffic that's going to be generated by this facility, parking, and the landscaping. What is this facility going to look like to people on the other side of Woodbine, on the east side of Woodbine, or the traveling public up and down Woodbine Avenue? So again, we haven't finalized our review of the landscape drawings. Again, the region will be looking at this as well as town staff. But I just wanted to bring this to council's attention. They are proposing some significant landscaping along the Woodbine frontage, and the bottom cross section really shows that the site will be a little higher than Woodbine, and they're proposing a combination of some retaining walls and sound noise attenuation walls, and within that 6-meter landscape area, there will be additional landscaping, screening, trees, etc. But we will bring those finer details to council when we report on the site plan a couple months from now. Next slide, please. This is the official plan designation. I think council's seen this. The 404 employment secondary plan was approved by council a couple of years ago. So this is one of our first proposals in this area. Highlighted in red is the 100-acre site subject to the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw is really implementing the official plan designation, employment designations. Next slide, please. Again, this is the area subject to the zoning bylaw amendment. The proposed zoning is an M2 employment zone with some site-specific additions, particularly those 4 bullet points: the cold storage distribution, the distribution center as a defined use in the zoning bylaw, and the truck refueling and truck repair garage that are ancillary to the main use being the distribution facility. And then we're also recommending a holding provision on the zoning bylaw. That came out of our discussions with the Conservation Authority. As you'll see when we get to the report, Conservation Authority has no objection to the zoning bylaw. They've received some of the background work, being specifically the natural heritage evaluation report. They want some more time to review that and some additional information from the applicant. And it really relates to the applicant's proposed work of the enhancement to the wetland feature to the north, closer to Mount Albert, which is owned by this applicant, and the proposal to enhance and restore the that wetland and the ecological restoration. So there's some additional work that the applicant will be submitting to the authority, and those are details that will be finalized as part of the site plan application. Next slide, please. And then last slide, and this is just a recommendation in the report, Madam Mayor and Council, is for Council to approve the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the lands from the old traditional rural zone to the appropriate employment zone, subject to a holding provision, and there'll be a future site plan application that will be submitted to council for your final consideration. Again, dealing with the specific matters related to the actual site development, the building size, parking, traffic, environmental features on the site, and the landscaping and screening components as proposed by the applicant. That's the last slide, Madam Mayor. I think if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I know John McGovern from the Rice Group has joined us as well, and he's offered to answer any questions that council may have. I think he attended the statutory public meeting last month.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead, and then Councillor Crothers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ramuno, I just want to clarify that the two issues that are of great concern to some of the neighboring folks in the area is around traffic and the appearance. So I know we're handling zoning today, and we won't really deal with the traffic and the appearance. until we get to the site plan. You mentioned a couple of months that would you have a better sense of what a couple of months could be? Because, I think those are the two areas that we have to get right, because we want to make sure that, the traffic isn't a burden to other residents in the area. I appreciate that we might have to widen Woodbine and that it is a regional, they've got the, the duty of care of that. But the look, the appearance, and I know some of the residents were hoping for a berm, but the way the space, the way everything's shoehorned in there, a berm may not be feasible. So while I like the idea of a retaining wall and sound fence, I don't want it to look like a Berlin Wall in East Gwillimbury. So if we can keep the appearance, pleasing, I think that would be I think that would be preferable. Anyway, I just wanted a sense of when you thought, if I could pin you down a little harder on when you think the site plan might be coming forward.
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor. No, good points, Councillor. And we have committed to meet with a number of residents who've already reached out to us. So we'll continue to sit down with them and share some of the details of the site plan application that they're interested in, particularly the traffic work and some of the landscaping provisions. So it is, it's a big site plan, a number of background reports that need to be reviewed by not only town staff, York Region, and the Conservation Authority. Typically that review, there's some urgency here on behalf of the applicant, obviously. It's a big project, but I think we'll probably need to give our some of these agencies, probably a month or so, if all goes well, to get some of their comments back. And so I'm thinking if, the rest of February and March, hopefully we can turn around those comments, and if the applicant has addressed all the comments that may have been raised by some of the departments and agencies, and obviously the concerns of the residents, we should be in a position to report back. I would think if we're at the end of February, probably sometime early in April, best case scenario, I think. But you're right, there are a couple key reports. I think the region is going to weigh in on obviously the traffic study, and they'll have conditions and impose at the site plan for the applicant related to any widenings along the frontage of Woodbine. We're going to have a big concern over the landscaping to make sure that that interface along Woodbine Avenue is properly screened and sufficient vegetation, etc. So yeah, there are a couple of things, and of course the Conservation Authority as well has already started their review, but they're looking for some additional information. So hopefully we can turn this around by April. And I know there's a sense of urgency here because it is a big project, but we need to get some certain things right here, and we'll do our best to move this forward as quickly as possible.
I did see another hand up, I believe. Councillor
That was
Credit.
me.
Yes,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Thanks. Can we go back to the page that was the official plan designation? Can we put that up on the screen? I just have a question about the EP, environmental protected area. There is a large area within the area that we're rezoning that is going to move to the north, where there's already some environmental protection. Just wondering if we can put that up on the screen. So
if I can ask the clerk, I think it was slide 4 or 5, the OP designation. Yeah, you can flip through it.
Yeah. So my question is, when we're
next slide, please. It's a few down. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just one moment. I believe these slides have frozen, so just one second.
Okay. Well, I'll speak to it, and hopefully when it comes up, it'll make a little bit more sense. Yeah, so there's a huge green area that's EP within the area that we are rezoning, and that was supposed to be moved to the north, where there's already other EP area. So I'm just wondering if we should be rezoning that at the same time to make sure that that swap actually happens. So you can see the size of that area that's EP on our official plan. If that is all moving up to the north end, I assume beside the green that's already up there, should we not be rezoning that whole area at the same time? I don't want this to get lost in the shuffle, and we lose this great big piece of environmentally protected land with only a minimal amount of enhancement at the top, the north end.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor Crothers, it's a good point. And it won't get lost because the applicant's also already submitted his zoning for the northern piece as well. And his natural heritage evaluation reports that have been submitted and the authority will be reviewing deals with the enhancement of that feature to the north. And that is why the Conservation Authority has agreed to support the zoning subject to an H. So the H won't be lifted until the Conservation Authority is completely satisfied with the work and the restoration measures that will take place in the wetland to the north, and that's subject to a separate zoning application. And there'll be a future site plan there as well. We don't have the site plan. So the authority is working with the applicant in reviewing that natural heritage report. And so by approving the zoning bylaw this evening with the H, there we have protection that we're not going to lose anything. The authority has already agreed to allow the development to take place on this phase 1. There is a large natural heritage feature that was identified at the OP level, but that really relates to the man-made pond that was built there, and based on the natural heritage report that was submitted, the authority has agreed to that essentially being eliminated, but the proposal is the expansion and enhancement of the wetland feature, and it's a true a wetland at the north end. So again, the protection is in place with the H provision. So that H will be subject to another application by the applicant. When the authority has signed off on that work, they'll come back with a lifting of the H. It'll probably be associated with the final report on the site plan application down the road.
Okay, so 3.5 years on council, I've never heard the H. So can you help me understand what the H is? I assume it means hold, but I'm not sure exactly what that means. It sounds like we are giving up control of this to the LSRCA. If they're fine with it, then we're fine with it, and we don't really get a say. I'm also hearing a slight change in the language that we're looking at enhancing what's already there rather than expanding it. I thought there was going to be an expansion of a comparable size.
Through you, Madam Mayor, sorry, I may have said enhancement, but there is it's an expansion. Okay. It's an expansion.
Good.
So a holding provision. So council's the approval authority. You pass the bylaw. So it's pretty commonplace to have a holding provision. We call it an H, but it's a holding provision. It's essentially a condition that's tied to the zoning bylaw that prior to development actually taking place. So even council prior to approving the site plan application, council would have to lift the H. And so that is the plan. And so we agreed with the authority that it's appropriate to proceed with an H. Within a couple of months, their review of the natural heritage evaluation to the north should be finalized. They'll be satisfied with that. We'll then bring the site plan for phase 1 to council and the application to lift the H.
Okay, and so at that point, if we don't like what we're seeing with the expansion enhancement to the north, we don't have to lift the H if that were the case. I assume we will negotiate it all out ahead of time behind the scenes and all that, but we do hold on to the ability to say no if it's not what we thought it was going to be, correct?
That's correct. Through you, Madam Mayor, we'll only bring that report back to council once the Conservation Authority and town staff are satisfied, and we'll explain how the applicant has addressed the concerns and conditions of the Conservation Authority and that future report.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm more comfortable with that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any objection to the sort of the high-level zoning discussion that we're having for this, but I was a little surprised to hear the word retaining walls and that sort of thing, especially along Woodbine Avenue. And so I hope that when it comes to the site plan, process, that we would get a little bit more creative than that, and maybe there's a way of creating some terracing with the parking lot or something to that effect. But having a retaining wall right up against Woodbine Avenue, I don't think is an ideal circumstance, and certainly not having a stone wall or a brick wall of that sort would also question things as well. So again, as Councillor Crone said, these are things to be dealt with at the site plan level, just given fair warning, I guess. Thank you.
We want it to look nice.
Madam Mayor, yeah, we've already had that discussion with the applicant, so we'll continue to work on the appropriate landscaping along that Woodbine frontage.
Mr. Ramuno, I had spoken to a couple of residents who had expressed some concerns after our last meeting regarding their wells, and I understand that that they have been contacted, I believe, to make sure that in fact, with all this development across the road from them, that their wells will be tested before, during, and after to make sure that they don't lose their water source. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, correct. And I forgot to mention that we met with a number of the residents, and we proposed the well monitoring and the construction survey, pre and post construction survey of their homes, and the applicant has agreed to that. So we will reach out to the applicants are aware of that, and will impose specific conditions in the site plan report and agreement that the applicants already agreed to undertake. And if the residents are agree to that, they will commit to well monitoring pre and post development, as well as the survey of their existing homes and their foundations during the construction period. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We have a motion in front of us, number 4, be it resolved that Development Services presentation dated February 15th, 2022, entitled 18574 and 18818 Woodbine Avenue, Green Lane North Realty Inc. and Green Lane Northeast GP Limited zoning bylaw amendment be received, and that Development Services Planning Branch Report P 2022-004 dated February 15th, 2022, entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application File Number ZBA 2108 be received, and that Council approve the Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application ZBA 2108 to rezone a portion of the subject property from rural RU to employment general, exception M2-169, and that Council place a holding provision H8 on the lands, and that Council enact the zoning bylaw attached as Appendix 7 to Report 2022-004. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone, Councillor Persichini, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We are now at adoption of minutes, and these minutes are from our February 1st meeting and our February 8th meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Foster, be it resolved that Council adopt the Council minutes from the meeting held on February 1st, 2022, and that Council adopt the Council minutes from the special meeting held on February 8th, 2022. All those in favor? And that's carried. We're at administration right now, and this is regarding Human Resources Branch Report, Admin 2022-01-02022, Statutory Public and Christmas Holiday Schedule. Seems a long way away for Christmas, but we better do it now. Then we can make some...
I will pass it to HR Director Michelle Collette to address any questions Council may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Collette?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of Council. This is our, we'll call it our housekeeping report that we do annually. And of course, as we know, we have Family Day coming up this weekend, and we want to make sure that everything is approved and that we're all set to go. So that is the report you have in front of you, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of Council.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Roy DeClemente, was that your hand up? Thank you. Be it resolved that Admin Human Resources Branch Report Number Admin 2022-01 dated February 15th, 2022, entitled 2022 Statutory Public and Proposed Holiday Closing Schedule be received, and that Council adopt the proposed 2022 Statutory Public and Proposed Holiday Closing Schedule. All those in favor? And that's carried. We're down to item L, and that's Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have two items on our agenda for council tonight. The first one is a memo, which is regarding our 2021 annual fill program update. So this memo provides our annual update to council on our fill program. Some highlights for the year include, for instance, MAP, Mount Albert Pit. They continue their fill operations. They're in a responsible and collaborative manner, and in accordance with our agreement and fill bylaw. The next large one we have is the Overholt Pit. They are in the process of preparing their site. They've imported granular and are constructing their internal haul routes. They've installed the radar cameras and speed boards on McCowan Road. They're begun importing topsoil for constructing the berm. And they've also contacted the residents, or in the process of contacting the residents, to make arrangements for tree delivery and installation as a requirement of their permit. We also note that no fill outside of the fill for the berm is going to be permitted until the intersection improvements are in place at Davis and McCowan Road. With regards to managing the fill town-wide, we note that on average, the fill activities in 2021 resumed to normal pre-pandemic levels. So that fill activity, which we saw lower amounts of in 2020, have bounced back up again. There were a number of non-compliant sites which were brought into compliance by staff and the public, and there were about 4 orders that were issued. And of those 4 orders, 2 were actually brought into compliance with the assistance of staff. So that's good news that things are moving along nicely in that regard. We also note that staff are proposing an update to the fill bylaw in order to keep pace with changing regulations and best management practices. So we intend to provide a draft bylaw for council before taking it out to the public for comments, and then return to council prior to the summer break with an updated bylaw for comments and hopefully get that approved before the summer comes around. So that's a summary of the report. Madam Mayor, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Molinari? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover? Oh, Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Molinari, been getting a bit of feedback from local residents along McCowan about truck traffic. I was surprised because I said they're not supposed to be doing any fill. I assume that the trucks were related to importation of fill for the berm on the Overholt site. I just wanted to confirm that that importation of fill for the berm also must adhere to the provisions of our agreement with the applicant and the permit holder. So truck traffic volumes and times adhered to it, so on. Those things still apply, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. All the terms of the agreement in the fill bylaw apply equally to this early stage of preparing the site as they do to they will in the future with the actual filling of the site. So truck traffic is limited to 150 trucks a day and an average of 100 trucks a day on an average annual basis.
Okay, thank you. And as far as speed boards, the speed boards are up and functioning, correct?
They are up and functioning, yes.
Okay. And we have access to that data?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm not seeing any. I have a resolution. Be it resolved that Community Infrastructure Environmental Services Memorandum dated February 15th, 2022, entitled 2021 Annual Fill Program Site Alteration Update be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy D. Clemente, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Our second report is regarding Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services, Recreation and Culture Report. And who might be leading this one off?
Through you, Madam Mayor. That's our second report of the day, and is an assumption report for Sundial Homes Phase 1. So it's a 216 lot fully serviced subdivision, which is just west of Leslie and just north of the existing Brenner development. The 13-month required maintenance period has expired, and all infrastructure is in accordance with the required standards, with the exception of some street trees. So staff are proposing to hold approximately $7,700 for the street trees and release the remaining securities. And subject to council approval, assumption would take place, would be effective March 1, in order to give us time to be able to do some administrative work to switch that over, and we proceed from there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Molinari? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Crothers. Be it resolved that Joint Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services and Community Parks, Recreation and Culture Report, CIES 2022-04, dated February 15th, 2022, entitled Assumption of Sundial Homes, Sharon Limited Phase 1, Sharon Village Development Subdivision 19T07002 be received, and that council enact a bylaw to assume public works and services within the plan of subdivision 65M-4504. All those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Molinari, are there any other items that we should be aware of this evening?
Nothing further at this time, Madam Mayor.
Any questions of Mr. Molinari at this time? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. We'll move along to item M, and that's Emergency and Community Safety Services. There's our chief. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Tonight I bring a proposed revised bylaw to council that's focusing on addressing community safety and concerns that relate to the use of fireworks within our town. The concerns that I've noted in the report include the increased risk of fire and burn injuries, animal-human impacts, and of course the environmental impact. In the proposed bylaw, staff are recommending a complete ban on all consumer fireworks within the town, including the purchase and sale of fireworks. And at this point, I'd just like to say, when I talk about consumer fireworks, that's what we used to call family fireworks, the low-level end of your driveway fireworks. In my opinion, it's the most effective and inclusive way to have a safe use of fireworks. Now, there's an emerging trend in some municipalities in Ontario and across Canada to try to manage this issue, because it is an issue, and with varying degrees of success with bylaw restrictions. Some of the major cities like Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, and Calgary have implemented bylaws that restrict these consumer fireworks with a permit, but they're not having a lot of success. In fact, City of Toronto, just over 3 million people. In 2020, they had 40 permits applied for the consumer fireworks. So it's a difficult thing to manage. So what we're also doing is including a provision in the bylaw for the safe use of the display and pyrotechnic fireworks under permit for faith-based and non-faith-based ceremonies, dates, and functions. The challenging part is going to be enforcement, and it's difficult because of the vast number of parks, open spaces, and large properties in East Gwillimbury, the short duration of the firework display, and of course limited staff. Where we would get success is enforcing at the retail level. I believe that if we come down and have a restrictive bylaw, that we can have a robust communication and education plan, and over the years it will just become accepted practice. I know this is going to be controversial, but with council support, what I'd like to do is propose this bylaw, but go out for 30 days to the public, seek some input, go out to some of the council committees, some of the user groups, stakeholders, and get some feedback, and come back to council in the next 30 days or 45 days, and give you a more fulsome report on the subject. I'm happy to take any questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I might have had to, I should have at the beginning of the meeting declared an interest, because I've been known to a lot of fireworks in the past in my own property. So through you, Madam Mayor, to the chief, just so that I'm clear, this would pretty much outlaw fireworks from individuals, coming together in a neighborhood street or whatever, having and lighting them off on their own, as they have in the past on July 1st, May 24th, and other such holidays. So is that the intent, to not only just to allow it to the licensed, permitted, insured, professional fireworks operators, and get rid of the individual consumer firework situations?
Yes. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cronin, yes, that's exactly what it would be. Very restrictive on the family or consumer fireworks. It would mean that we could educate people and have them go to larger, maybe town sanctioned fireworks displays of the display, or the pyrotechnic displays. But in essence, yeah, it would be very restrictive on the low level consumer fireworks.
Okay. All right. I know you probably want to do more consultation on this. I'm going to have a hard time supporting this, but we've chatted, and I've let you know about my position. But thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I agree with the prohibiting sale. I think that's important. I'm disappointed in the prohibiting family fireworks. The diversity committee asked council to take a look at this, because people who celebrate Diwali like to shoot off fireworks in their backyard. That's part of their way of celebrating. And in response to that, we end fireworks everywhere. To me, it's a really bad look. I also don't like that our report talks about the impact on the environment, the impact on animals and humans, yet we're not changing our behavior at all. This came to council last year, or the year before, where someone had requested that we use silent fireworks to have less of an impact, and council said no, it was too costly to do that. But now we have another report before us that talks about the impact of fireworks, and we're not changing our behavior at all. We're asking our residents to change their behavior. So I'm interested to see what the consultation process reveals, but as someone who has had many fireworks going off in our backyard over the years, I'm disappointed to see an end to that. I know there's a number of streets that they all get together and pool their money and do a nice little community display, and that amount of togetherness is nothing compared to having the big ones that everyone has to drive to. Then you're worried about people drinking and driving. Being able to go out on your street with your neighbors, I think is much more preferred. But I appreciate, Chief, that you're taking this from a safety perspective. So I understand where you're coming from with this. I just think that this is not something that our residents are asking for. And my one last comment is in the report, we talked about the inability to enforce the current bylaw. So making a more restrictive bylaw that we are really not going to be able to enforce I think the only people who are going to suffer are going to be the people who are trying to follow the rules. The rule breakers are still going to break the rules, and we're not going to be able to do anything about it. So I'm not sure that we're solving the problem that some residents have. I'll eagerly await the public consultation, but as is, this isn't something I feel supportive of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente and then Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess my approach here is that I sympathize and empathize with the chief's position, and that is that we have tasked him with community safety, and we've asked his professional opinion, and his professional opinion in the interests of community safety, the mental health of our pets and our other humans, and quite frankly, injury prevention, and potential loss of property through fire and so on. It's his professional recommendation that we make this step, and so I would like to hear more from our constituents about this, but I definitely see a very big difference between somebody who is setting off fireworks or releasing lanterns into a much denser municipality, a much denser built up area, such as our newer subdivisions with smaller lots and wooden fences, than I do with a large scale sanctioned, insured, permitted display that goes on at a larger facility, like a large open space like at the Lions Park or even one of our larger urban parks. It's a very big distinction for me between that and the person setting off a firework basically in my backyard, where I don't know if they have the proper training or even a bucket of water nearby. And that for me, that's a growing pain, I think, that our municipality is having to struggle with. So I welcome the consultation process, and I look forward to hearing more from you, Chief. And I think ultimately, while it may be difficult to enforce, I think that the education aspect of it, regardless of how we proceed, is a worthwhile endeavor, just to make sure that even if we don't pass this bylaw, that we undertake some education to make sure that people understand that there is a significant inherent risk in personal fireworks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Chief, I hope I don't muddy the waters here. But I see 100% where you're coming from with this, having been on the other side of it, on your side of it for a number of years and dealing with some of those. It might be worthwhile, and I don't know if I have a good explanation or if you have a good one either, but it might be worthwhile speaking and letting council know that sometimes in something like this, it's easier to go completely one way or the other and not settle in the middle. And what I mean by that is I understand that if you try to settle in the middle somehow, then that puts the onus on someone to make decisions. And sometimes people are found wrong and sometimes people are found right. And unfortunately, the chief or the public education people or fire prevention people are now caught in the middle, or, you know, the crew on duty are now caught in the middle trying to, I guess, trying to cut a line down the center as to who's doing what. So I don't know if it's worthwhile, if you have a better explanation than that, Chief. What I'm trying to say, it's easier to go with, you know, either you do or you don't. And when you don't, then there's an easy way to cut that off.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through you to Councillor Foster, I agree with you, and that's the approach that I take. I hate to say it's black and white, but I think it needs to be. And you know, we lay down the law, and then we take the time to educate and you know, make awareness and for the community.
Chief, have you spoken to any of our bordering municipalities around to see where they're at, how they did it, if they are looking at this? Because I know that many times what Newmarket is doing is important to people in East Gwillimbury, likewise Mount Albert and Durham as well. So I'd like to hear your comments on that, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, we early in this process, we did a scan just of York Region, of course, and there's no other department or there's no other municipality that's imposing a restriction of this this magnitude. They've all got a combination of you know, permits for certain days and other days and rain dates, and it becomes very, like Councillor Foster said, it becomes very complicated for the fire staff and even for the bylaw staff to try to keep it straight. So this would be, we would be the first in York Region to come out with this complete ban.
I like to be a leader, but maybe not with this one.
I understand.
Mr. Webster, go ahead, please.
I'm listening intently to this, Madam Mayor, and if truth be known, and Chief, please don't slap my hand for this, but there was a bylaw attached to the first report I saw that was going to be enacted tonight, and I sort of said, maybe Chief, we should slow down a bit on this one. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? And I still think 30 days isn't adequate. I think there's work to be done on this one. And maybe if it's referred back with a reasonable timeline for another report back to council with consultation to ensure that we're looking after all the things we should be at this point, including comparing to municipalities, because enforceability is going to be difficult under any measure. And I think 30 days is a little ambitious. So I'll leave that to council's discretion as to what a more reasonable report back time frame might be.
Thank you. Members of council, Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I agree with that. And if we're going to have a little bit more of a lengthy report back, I'm hoping that maybe we can put together an education strategy around this of how we will educate people coming up to May 2-4 long weekend and Canada Day and any of the other holidays that are coming up. I was saying to one of my colleagues that for years we set off fireworks for New Year's, had no idea it wasn't allowed. So I think we need to do a really good job of communicating that and making sure that our residents know what's expected. You know, we had a whole checklist of our safety things that we did whenever we did fireworks. I don't know if everyone does that, so maybe just having that available so that people can get that education piece. I also think that since we have a report that speaks to the impact of fireworks on people, the environment, and animals, that we should reconsider our decision about our own fireworks. And, you know, like I've said before, put our money where our mouth is. If we think that fireworks are disruptive, then I do think we need to cost out what it would cost for us to go with the silent fireworks for some of our future events. Doing less fireworks that are more responsible, to me, would be a good sign from council, and especially when we have a report right now that's public where we have identified the problems with fireworks. So I think it's something that maybe we could look at when the report comes back. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Chief's busy writing those things down. It would seem to me that our item M number 1 is received for information at this point, and that staff seek public input and consultation and report back. Chief, or would you like it in its entirety?
Sorry, Your Honor, I missed the question there.
Oh, we have 3 points here, and I wasn't sure whether the second one, that council review the proposed fireworks bylaw, is attached in Appendix 1 to the Emergency and Community Services Report, and that staff seek public input and consultation report back to council. Is that what members of council are suggesting at this time? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with passing these 3 resolutions at this time. In fact, we should have already done the review of the proposed bylaw because it was part of our agenda package. But we're asking staff to do some input, to do some public input and consultation, and put together some public education materials and report back to us. And I think that's covered within these resolutions. And I'm happy to move that at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Persichini. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We're down at item N, legal and counsel support services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one item on the agenda this evening. Madam Clerk and her team have been very busy preparing for the election, and it has some very good successes to share with you this evening. So short presentation. I'll just turn it over to Madam Clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horner. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just bear with me for a moment. I'm just going to pull up these slides on the screen. All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council staff, and members of the public tuning in to watch our live stream tonight. My name is Tara Lejavardi, and I'm the Municipal Clerk and Director of Legislative Services. And tonight, I'm joined by a very key member of our Clerks branch, Matine Monzavi, our Elections Coordinator. And together, we were pleased to provide you with a brief introduction of the key activities that we have undertaken and are underway, an overview of our hybrid election model, and an outline of the COVID impacts and next steps. To start, I wanted to provide you with an outline of some of the key activities that we've been undertaking since 2020. These include research, planning, preparation, solicitation of feedback from members of council as well as members of the public on various different methods of voting, introduction of alternative methods of voting, and subsequent to that, the adoption of a bylaw to allow for the use of tabulators as well as internet voting as an additional option to electors to cast their ballot. Following the adoption of the bylaw that happened last year, Clerk staff initiated a joint venture with our neighboring municipality of Town of Georgina. And essentially, the reason for that was to carry out a joint procurement process. This initiative enabled us to issue 2 distinct RFPs, one for internet voting and the other one for optical scan tabulator. I'm pleased to announce that both of those RSPs are now closed and a vendor evaluation and selection process is well underway. In addition to the RFP activities, the Clerks branch was also successful in finalizing the recruitment of our newly appointed deputy clerk and as well as the elections coordinator. I would like to now turn your attention to some of the upcoming activities for 2022 and beyond. As you can see on the slide before you, there are a number of activities planned for pre and post-election. These include, but are not limited to, the finalization of the joint communication strategy with the Town of Georgina, information technology strategy, a thorough review of protocols, policies, and bylaws to ensure that we can align them with the new voting model, some reporting timelines to council, and future plan activities focused on inaugural meeting of the new term of council, as well as council orientation sessions. One of the many key activities that we're undertaking is also the development of the internal elections working team. Given the complexities in running a hybrid election and taking into consideration COVID implications, the election working team will be comprised of various subject matter experts from all across our organization, with an emphasis on expertise coming from our information technology area and communications to further support the hybrid model. I will now pass the presentation over to Matine, who is going to be providing you guys with the remainder of the updates outlined in tonight's presentation. Matine, over to you.
Thank you, Tara. Good evening, Mayor Haxton and members of council. I'm pleased to be in attendance tonight as the Clerks branch presents the 2022 municipal election status update. As you are aware, in the fall of 2021, council opted to utilize a new voting model for the 2022 municipal election. This voting model is comprised of a combined hybrid method, which includes in-person and online voting opportunities, specifically for advanced polling days and times. Eligible electors will be provided with an opportunity to cast their vote either by attending a voting location in person or voting online via convenient and secure method of voting. Online voting during the advanced polling period enables electors to vote anywhere via a reliable, stable internet connection and by utilizing a number of devices, including computers, laptops, tablets, or smartphones. Designated polling stations during the advanced polls will be fully equipped to provide eligible electors the opportunity to vote online through a town-issued device, should they select this option. It is important to note that on Election Day, October 24th, 2022, Electors will only be able to attend in person at a designated polling station within their ward in order to cast their vote using paper ballots and a tabulation machine. I will now provide a brief overview of the proposed advanced voting days and times, along with the prospective polling stations. Next slide, please. For the purpose of the upcoming election, staff have leveraged multiple polling stations and voting dates in accordance with the 2018 voting model. Flexible voting dates and times have been identified to provide electors ease of access and ample opportunities to vote. Staff have identified 5 advanced voting days and times that include a series of weekends, including a statutory holiday in October, namely Thanksgiving long weekend. Advanced voting days will offer both daytime and evening timeframes and will employ a vote anywhere model, allowing for all eligible electors to cast their vote from a different ward if they so choose to. Hypothetically speaking, for example, an eligible elector residing in the northeastern corner of Ward 3 could be in the Yonge and Green Lane area running some errands and could potentially choose to vote in Ward 1 during the advanced polling days and times. At the present time, all voting locations are under further review to ensure compliance with the highest accessibility standards. For instance, accessible parking, accessible entrance, exit, and exit ways, and ramps. In addition, given the modernization process in this particular municipal election, staff are currently working to review the facility readiness objectives, which are mainly focused on ensuring adequate supply of electricity and a stable internet connection to be provided. As a reminder, given the ever-changing COVID-19 regulations, staff will further review the various health and safety requirements to ensure that facilities can support and abide by provincial regulations. This includes physical distancing requirements and occupancy rates. Any further updates regarding the confirmation of voting locations will be provided in the near future. Next slide, please. This slide outlines a series of key important and legislative calendar dates for your information and consideration. As a side note, Election Day, as I previously mentioned, falls on Monday, October 24th, 2022. I would also like to identify Monday, September 26th as the earliest date candidates or registered third-party advertisers may have signs to be erected. This is stipulated as per the town's election sign bylaw number 2018-044, which states, no person shall place or permit to be placed an election sign for a municipal election until after the candidate has filed his or her nomination with the municipal clerk, or in the case of a registered party, registered with the municipal clerk, and in any event, no earlier than 28 calendar days prior to voting day in the year of a regular election or by-election. Next slide, please. The pandemic introduces a number of new challenges and complexities for nearly all election processes, including the availability and acquisition of voting technology, the safe operation of voting locations, the associated risks and impacts of public health measures on civic participation, and lastly, the recruitment and training of election day personnel. Since many of the pandemic's long-term effects are difficult to forecast, significant contingency planning will be required to cover a range of possible pandemic scenarios that may exist from now to October of this year. Next slide, please. To conclude, staff are currently completing the internet and tabulator vendor evaluation and selection process. A report will be presented to Council next month on March 8th. Staff will also continue to leverage partnership opportunities with colleagues across York Region, as well as the Provincial Elections Working Group. This brings us to the end of our elections update. We would be happy to answer any questions or receive comments at this time. Thank you.
Questions? Very complete. Thank you very much. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, the staff. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was thorough, and welcome, my team. I have a concern, I guess I would say, and I appreciate that there may be limitations. That given the size of Ward 3, I think you could place Wards 1 and 2 in Ward 3 and still have space left over. So we have great distances, and I think if in the past we've had a polling station at North Union Hall, and it would be great if we could have something that could accommodate the residents that live at that end of the ward, because it could be a 15-20 minute drive for some of those folks to get into Mount Albert. Now I appreciate North Union Hall may not be up to spec on electrical, and I know the internet. North Union Hall does not have internet, but I'm just wondering if there's any other accommodations that we can think of, or at least I would charge you to be a little more creative to see what we could do to accommodate those folks, because not everyone up there, because internet is a challenge in the rural areas. Sometimes the internet is wobbly at best. So I put it back to you to see if there's anything out there that could be done. And secondly, I have a second question: the RFPs that are going out. I know some vendors only do the internet, other vendors just do the tabulator. Do we have any of the vendors that do both, so we're not running parallel elections as it might be? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I may be able to tackle some of the questions in some way and form. So very well point, Councillor Cronin, in terms of identifying that there is a bit of a distance from North Union and areas within the rural pockets of Ward 3. One of the advantages of having a hybrid model and providing for a vote anywhere model during advance is the ability to enable individuals to cast their vote anywhere from Ward 1, 2 to 3. So one of our tactics in terms of communication is to ensure that we can educate our community, specifically our eligible electors who have traditionally voted at that location, and essentially assist them in terms of finding the appropriate location to cast their vote in that manner. We are actively engaged with our facility staff as well as IT staff to really focus on a review of all of our facilities and looking at the inventory of those that we may not have had an opportunity to review. There's also discussions being held with school boards to identify opportunities. However, these are still underway, and we're hoping to be able to solidify and validate some of these based off of our site visits and conducting adequate load testing. Again, I'm no expert when it comes to electricity, but there are certain activities that we have to undertake to ensure that we can meet a particular type of standard for those facilities. But mainly making sure that the electors are educated, well provided with information on how they can go about casting their vote. So that is our first attempt of trying to publicize a different way of voting at a different location for advance. And I believe your second question was geared towards identifying vendors that could provide two services. Of course, there are vendors in the industry that do provide them. Unfortunately, one of the issues within the industry right now is specifically in relation to supply and demand shortages. As you saw in one of the slides that we had identified, specifically talking about COVID implications, some of the vendors have identified that they are not able to meet both type of services. And as a result, most municipalities are looking into deploying two different services from two different areas. However, what I have done within the parameters of both RFEs is to ensure that adequate language was put in place to make sure that vendors can talk to each other, that there could be a collaborative effort to aggregate results and at the same time provide a very high level of service on each side, at the same time ensuring that the integrity of the election can be protected from a security standpoint. So that said, there is a comfort level that the approach that we've taken and the specific technical writings in the RFP has protected us in that manner. But there is definitely a different way of looking at election, especially in a pandemic year when it comes to supply and demand. And essentially, it's just the equipment and paper products that are becoming more of an issue. Hence why we're trying to make sure that we can solidify and secure everything early on in Q1 of 2022 to allow us to not have to deal with this hurdle down the road into Q2. I hope that provides a bit of a response, but happy to provide any additional comments if anyone else has a question.
Thank you. Additional questions, Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too had identified the rural area as a bit of a challenge, and my thought had been it might be easier if there was a secondary pole set up at a more central location like the sports complex, because it may be easier for someone who lives at Holborn Road and Leslie Street to go there than it would be for them to make the trip all the way out to Mount Albert should they wish to vote in person on voting day. The comment that I wanted to make was with respect to your secondary or emergency locations. You've got two of them that are places of worship, and as we know, this is a secular activity and it is not related to any organized religion. I can share, and I think I've shared this in the past, when I was canvassing in the past and I mentioned that one of their voting places was at a church, there was an issue with respect to that individual's faith, and they were not going to go and vote simply because their voting place was in a church. And so I want us to do everything in our power to avoid that circumstance. And I realize that these are secondary or emergency locations, but if there's something that we can do to avoid that circumstance, I would like us to make every effort to do so. Quite frankly, I think your strategy in trying to drive people to the advance polls and to the internet voting is the best strategy at this point. And I know that our community will have vivid memories of what happened during the federal election. And having worked as a central poll supervisor at our sports complex, I can assure you that I would not like to see that happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't want to see it happen again. Other questions and comments? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. How many advanced poll locations did we have in the past? 3 sounds like not a lot, and I'm just wondering if we've cut back.
Through Madam Mayor, we've set up 3 advanced vote locations in the past, but we also leveraged Civic Center as another location. So that again is another location we are going to be leveraging in advance, specifically to allow for traffic that is floating through the Civic Center to be able to have an opportunity here at 19,000 Leslie Street. However, in the past, it's been 3 identified with the addition of Civic Center.
Okay, so it's exact same number of polling stations in the same locations as before.
That's correct, yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, staff. There was a lot of work put into this, and I think it's by the number of questions, people are quite comfortable with what is going to take place. We're always, things always new, challenge us just a little bit, but I think that you've done a really good job, so thank you very much. I have a resolution, be it resolved that Legal and Counsel Support Services Clerks Branch presentation dated February 15th, 2022, entitled 2022 Municipal Election Status be received. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, staff. We look forward to you coming back. I'm not seeing any other items on Legal and Counsel Support Services. I'll move along to Corporate Services. I do not see anything at this time. Finance under P, none at this time. Q, Community Parks, Recreation and Culture, none at this time. R, correspondence for consideration, none at this time. Before I move along to our bylaws, are there any questions for any of these that people feel they would like to deal with them today or tomorrow would work just as well? I'm not seeing any burning items, so we'll move along to bylaws. We have 3 bylaws. And are there any questions on the 3 bylaws? I'm not seeing any at this time. I won't read each one of them out. I believe everybody has them in front of them as well. Could I have a mover and a seconder for bylaws? I'll put them all together unless somebody wants to separate them out. 3 bylaws. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Persichini. Not seeing any questions. Be it resolved that bylaws 2022-0012, 2022-013, and 2022-014 be taken as read and acted and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. All those in favor? And that's carried. Other business, item T, that's March 22nd, 2022, 10 a.m. a council workshop. Topic, closed meeting regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion training. Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? That's carried. We have a confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw 2022-015 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council meeting held on February 15th, 2022 to be taken as read and acted and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone. Councillor Morton, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. And we have an adjournment at, I have 9:15. Moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. A lot of excellent material this time. Thank you, staff. Well done. And it's 9:15, so we've had just over 3 hours. And thank you to everybody for their indulgence tonight.
Good night, all.
With that, have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.